Not everything that disappears is lost. Not every silence is empty. Tonight we drift into a different kind of darkness. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something watching, waiting, hidden just beyond our reach. These are the stories whispered between static signals and shut government doors. The theories too strange to prove and too detailed to dismiss. From vanishing transmissions to secret visitors, we'll trace the soft echo of something other, not to awaken fear, but to fall, gently, into the forbidden. So close your eyes. The contact has already begun. In the quiet void between stars, Earth listens. Since the early days of radio, our planet has pulsed signals into the dark, music, math, Morse code, greetings. But what if, just once, something pulsed back? In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio captured something it wasn't supposed to, a single signal, a narrowband, 72-second burst from the constellation Sagittarius. It matched the expected signature of an interstellar transmission. Not noise, not a glitch, something intentional. The astronomer on duty, Jerry Amon, circled the data printout and wrote one word in the margin. Wow. And so it became known as the WOW signal. But what made it different? It was clean, strong. It came from a part of the spectrum, not used by human broadcasts. It wasn't repeating like a pulsar or echoing like debris. It simply appeared. Then it vanished. Attempts to find it again failed. The telescope, not equipped to triangulate, couldn't pinpoint its exact origin, and so, it joined the archive of almost evidence without conclusion. Skeptics proposed mundane causes. Maybe a reflection from Earth. Maybe a secret military satellite. Maybe a one-time natural event. But no explanation fit quite right. No terrestrial source accounted for the frequency, the signal shape, or the silence that followed. SETI scientists, despite decades of listening since, have never heard another signal quite like it. But what if it wasn't set meant to repeat? Some theorists have proposed it was a probe's ping, a one-time call to say, "We see you." Others speculate it was meant to activate something, biological, mechanical, or even psychological, in those who discovered it. Not a message for Earth, but for one of us. This is where the story drifts toward the forbidden. In fringe circles, rumors swirl of a second part of the WOW signal, data supposedly recorded, but not released. Some claim, Eamon or others at Ohio State observed subtle irregularities in the signal structure, a code, a pattern, something that didn't make sense if it was just background noise. These claims were never verified. Eamon himself always insisted the signal remained unexplained, but unproven as extraterrestrial, and yet the mythology of it grew, quietly, underground, in scattered, typewritten reports and leaked forums. One such tale speaks of a signal key that matches certain biological patterns in human DNA, a harmonic sequence, they say, that resonates in cell development. There is no science behind it. But science here is not the point. This isn't the story of what was proven. It's the story of what wasn't allowed to be. Conspiracy theorists believe the signal was buried on purpose, not because it wasn't alien, but because it was. They say it was intercepted and locked away by an internal group within NASA, that within 48 hours, 3 unmarked vans arrived at the observatory, that the printed signal sheet was taken, duplicated, and destroyed. Only the circled WOW copy remained, a relic, not a record. Again, none of this is proven. And maybe that's why the story survives. It's not a headline. It's a whisper. The kind that slips between static in the early morning hours. The kind that follows you in the silence between stations. The kind that makes you wonder, what else has vanished? Maybe the contact happened. And maybe, like a single word spoken in a vast empty cathedral, it only needed to be heard once. As you lay still, imagine it. A flicker in the sky. A signal, perfectly timed. A message sent not to start a conversation, but to end our loneliness. It didn't start with flying saucers. It started with a rancher. In the dry July heat of 1947, Mac Brazel stumbled across something unusual on his property in Roswell, New Mexico. Strange debris scattered across the desert, foil-like material, lightweight beams, some marked with unrecognizable symbols. It didn't burn, bend, or behave like anything he'd seen. So he did what anyone might do, he reported it. The local Air Force base responded swiftly, and that's when things spiraled into legend. Within a day, the military issued a press release. ROAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. The next day they retracted it. It wasn't a saucer, they said, just a weather balloon. Nothing to see here. But the words were already out. The photos already taken. The story already whispered. And some say those whispers never stopped. Officially, Roswell was explained decades later. In the 1990s, the US government declassified documents claiming the debris came from Project Mogul, a secret balloon operation designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The materials used were, supposedly, experimental for the time. The cover-up wasn't about aliens, they said. It was about the Cold War. But there's SIP's always been a second story. A quieter one. Passed between former officers, family members, and anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. It speaks of bodies. 4, maybe 5. Small, grey, not human. One was said to still be alive, kept briefly at the base before being moved. Witnesses described eyes too large, limbs too thin, skin that shimmered oddly under the desert sun, and the smell, antiseptic, but wrong, like burnt metal and dust. Those who spoke too loudly were silenced, threatened, transferred, or found with sudden illnesses. One nurse, said to have seen the bodies during autopsy, disappeared a week later. Her name remains in Air Force records, but no trace of her life after that moment can be found. The mortician who received a strange call, asking how to preserve small human remains in sealed containers, was later dismissed. He never forgot the question. But perhaps the strangest account came from a man decades later, a high-ranking official near the end of his life. In a filmed, off-the-record interview, he described a recovered craft unlike any aircraft he'd seen. He claimed it wasn't made, it was grown, that the materials were organic, that the ship was not just piloted, but alive. Could it be true? Could Roswell have been the first accidental moment of exposure, a failed cover-up that unraveled too late? If so, the retraction wasn't just about hiding a crash. It was about controlling a narrative. Roswell became the archetype. The seed from which all alien cover-up stories grew, and maybe that was intentional. By reducing the real event to a pop culture joke, the truth, if there was one, could be buried under decades of movie scripts and supermarket tabloid headlines. No one takes it seriously anymore. Which is, perhaps, the greatest success of the disinformation campaign. But in the quiet hours of the night, as you close your eyes and the hum of technology fades, ask yourself, why Roswell? Why lie so badly, so quickly? Why reissue the story, only to cover it up? Unless something was found, and someone was told to make it disappear. There are no answers here, only whispers. But sometimes, it's the whispers that carry the weight. The truth may not be out there. It might already be under your feet. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. An embassy for aliens, built in secret, hidden in plain sight, waiting for visitors who never arrive. And yet, over the decades, this theory has persisted that somewhere on Earth, perhaps beneath a desert, within a mountain, or disguised as an ordinary structure, there exists a site designed, not by humans for humans, but by humans for something else. Not to welcome aliens publicly, but to prepare for private diplomacy. This is the alien embassy rumor, and it's not as fringe as it sounds. In 1960, an eccentric Swiss UFO contactee named George Van Tassel claimed that extraterrestrials had instructed him to construct a structure in the Mojave Desert. He called it the Integratron, a domed, all-wood chamber said to harness magnetic fields and time-space energies to facilitate communication with other beings. He died mysteriously before it was completed. Then there's the tale of Mount Yamantau in Russia, an immense, heavily guarded underground complex, built during the Cold War, and still largely off-limits today. Some say it's just a military installation. Others believe it was created as a bunker for elite contact events, a secure embassy for non-human meetings, protected from the public. But the most persistent version of the alien embassy rumor doesn't involve isolated structures or paranoid desert prophets. It involves governments and quiet cooperation. In 1987, a bizarre set of claims surfaced from anonymous sources within NATO, alleging that an underground facility beneath the Gobi Desert was constructed as a multinational joint project, overseen by both Western and Eastern intelligence, in preparation for formal diplomatic contact with an alien race known only as the Varel. According to the rumor, The facility had multiple entrances, used complex biometric screening, and remained powered by a self-sustaining geothermal system that never required external input. No such facility was ever proven to exist. No such project was ever officially acknowledged. But strange details persist. Satellite imaging shows unusual heat signatures in uninhabited regions of the Gobi. Travel restrictions remain in place for reasons listed as environmental instability, and several geological surveyors from independent universities have gone missing after conducting exploratory missions in those regions. Coincidence, perhaps? Or cover story? What would such a place even look like? Theories suggest a minimalistic, antiseptic design, white walls, rounded edges, rooms with no apparent purpose, perhaps chairs for guests who never arrived, air systems designed to mimic multiple atmospheric compositions, lighting with adjustable wavelengths, and a chamber somewhere deep inside, perfectly silent, a room built not for sound but for telepathy. In other words, not human in concept, not meant for us. Some believe that this embassy was built on faith, not because aliens had asked for it, but because governments anticipated contact, or feared it, or were told to prepare. Who told them? That part of the rumor is never clear. Sometimes it's a psychic, sometimes it's a secret document, sometimes it's simply them, the shadowy group beneath every conspiracy, always implied, never proven. But then there are the other stories. From remote viewers, lucid dreamers, and astral projectors, who all describe similar visions of the meeting place, a structure underground, bright but cold, where a small group of humans meet beings described not as grey or insectoid, but tall, translucent, and utterly still. Are they dreams? Or memories? Or perhaps implanted ideas, like a blueprint left in the collective unconscious? You may never know. That sits the point. These rumors are not about truth. They're about possibilities we're not allowed to investigate. Because if an alien embassy really does exist, what does it mean that it sips empty? Maybe it sips waiting. Maybe it sips already been used. Or maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to go there at all. Let the thought drift across your mind like wind across the dunes. The idea of a building with no doors, a conversation with no voice, a treaty signed by no hands. The meeting may have already begun. And we may not be the hosts. It came without warning. Just after 10 p.m. on November 26, 1977, the regular news broadcast on Southern television in the UK was suddenly interrupted. A voice, mechanical, slow, and oddly resonant, replaced the presenter. The screen shimmered slightly, the image distorted. Viewers across southern England froze in place as they heard something they never forget. This is the voice of Virilan, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command. It lasted 6 minutes. 6 minutes of strange, calm speech. 6 minutes that have never been fully explained. 6 minutes where something, or someone, took over a terrestrial broadcast system, and no one saw it coming. The voice claimed to be part of an interstellar alliance observing Earth. It warned of the dangers of nuclear weapons, greed, and humanity's obsession with materialism. It urged listeners to live in peace and prepare for the evolution of consciousness. It didn't demand worship. It didn't promise salvation. It simply offered guidance, like a parent trying to calm a panicked child. And then, it was gone. The regular broadcast resumed. No further contact. No follow-up message. Just silence. Authorities called it a hoax. They blamed a local transmitter hijack, possibly via microwave relay from a nearby hill. A technical prank, they said, pulled off by a clever radio pirate. But there was one problem. To override that kind of broadcast in 1977 required precise knowledge of analog systems, access to private infrastructure, and hardware that most hobbyists couldn't afford, let alone operate in perfect sync across multiple locations. No group ever claimed responsibility, no individual stepped forward, no arrest was made. It was as if the signal came from nowhere and left no trace. And so, theories bloomed. Some believed it was an elaborate psychological test, orchestrated by British intelligence to measure public response to alien contact, a social experiment, never acknowledged, buried under the veil of plausible denial. Others suggested a rogue insider, someone within the station itself, perhaps with deeper connections, a technician with access to frequencies not listed in public documents. But others believed it was real, that villain, or whoever used that name, wasn't human. That the voice wasn't generated through wires and mixers, but through resonance, a form of communication not yet understood. That it didn't hijack the signal, it merged with it. That the distortion was not a glitch, but a byproduct of something non-physical speaking through physical means. And then there sits the strangest detail of all. Some viewers reported feeling calm, almost euphoric. A few even described hearing additional words that others did not, words that felt personal, directed, as though the message was tailored to each listener's thoughts. Were they imagining it? Or was the message never meant for the masses, but for individuals hidden within them? The Ashtar Galactic Command, mentioned in the message, had been referenced in earlier contactee literature, strange books from the 1950s filled with stories of benevolent alien councils and higher dimensional beings. Most dismissed it as New Age fiction, but in this moment, those stories stepped into a new light. Suddenly, they weren't sipped fringe theories. They were echoes. If it was a hoax, it was elegant, non-violent, philosophical, a prank with a message of peace. If it was real, it was even more unsettling, because it meant someone was watching, someone capable of speaking through our own devices, without permission or trace. No similar incident has occurred since. No second message, no repeat. Just one moment. One ripple. One voice that broke through the noise of modern life to say, "Be still, now, and listen." And maybe that sips all contact ever needs to be. So let the transmission settle in your memory, like a radio left on in the background. Feel the hum behind your thoughts, the quiet beneath the static. Not everything that speaks does so in words. Not everything that speaks needs to be heard by everyone. The message may already be inside you. It began with a light. Actually many lights, drifting silently over Arizona on the evening of March 13th, 1997. They formed a V-shape, massive, slow, so silent it was eerie. Thousands saw it, ordinary people, families, pilots, even the governor. They watched the sky above Phoenix and didn't know what they were watching. Some thought it was one large craft. Others believed it was a formation of several smaller vehicles moving in perfect synchronization. The lights hovered, glided, vanished. Witnesses said the stars blinked out behind the object, as if something solid, something enormous had blocked them. But no noise. No sonic boom, no jet engines. Just movement and stillness. And then it was gone. At first, the story gained traction. Local news ran interviews. People flooded radio stations with calls. The footage, grainy, handheld VHS, was broadcast across national networks. You can still watch it. The lights are real. What they are, though, is not. The US military stepped in quickly. They said it was flares, dropped from A-10 Warthog aircraft on a training run at the Barry Goldwater Range. Flares, they said, could float for a long time, could move with the wind, could look unusual when seen from a distance. But those who were there didn't set by it. Because what they saw wasn't scepter lights. It was a craft. One man described standing in his backyard as the V-shaped object passed overhead. He said it blocked out the sky for minutes. He could see details, a metallic underbelly, faint blue pulsing lights along the seams, and something that looked like shifting panels, as if the craft were breathing. He said it felt like being watched. Then there was the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington. At the time he held a press conference where he brought out someone dressed in an alien costume, a mocking move that angered many witnesses. But years later, in a stunning reversal, Symington admitted he had seen the object himself. He described it as otherworldly and confirmed it was not man-made. So why the mockery? Why the cover? Maybe because the truth was too strange. Or maybe because the truth was classified. Some theorists believe the Phoenix lights were a test, not of technology, but of perception, a psychological trial. Release an unidentified object into public space. Watch how people react, control the narrative, study the fallout. Others believe it wasn't set Rs at all. That the craft was alien, not here to harm, but to reveal, a soft introduction. A chance to let us look up, not in terror, but in awe. And maybe we failed. Because the moment wonder appeared, the machine of denial began spinning. Skepticism was weaponized. Witnesses were mocked. Evidence was buried in explanations that didn't match the experience. But some held on, and still do. Because memory doesn't care about press releases. Because you know what you saw, even when no one believes you. The Phoenix Lights remain one of the most well-documented mass UFO sightings in modern history, and yet, to this day there is no official acknowledgement of anything unusual. No apology, no explanation, no investigation. Just lights. And silence. But if you were there, if you felt the cold stillness as something moved across the desert sky, you don't forget. You carry it. Like a dream you almost understood. Like a message written in the stars. So let yourself drift now. Let the image return. A quiet night. A big sky. A shape that shouldn't be there yet is. And beneath it, 1,000 people, looking up, together, in a moment of shared disbelief. Maybe that's what contact is. Not a landing, not a speech. Just a memory. Unmistakable. Unshakable. And utterly ignored. Sleep peacefully. The lights might come back. They always do. Long before the term surveillance state entered public awareness, long before satellites mapped every inch of Earth, there were already men listening. Not to us, but to the sky. Hidden in bunkers, buried in mountains, tucked away in sealed rooms beneath nondescript government buildings. They had one task: intercept the silence. These were the early signals intelligence teams, groups within the NSA, GCHQ, GRU, and other alphabet soup agencies. They weren't scanning for enemy plans or troop movements. They were scanning for something else. Patterns. Pings. Things that didn't set belong. There is a theory, whispered even among seasoned analysts, that a classified global network was established not just to detect nuclear threats, but to detect non-terrestrial transmissions. Unofficially, it's called Project Silent Basin. Officially, it doesn't yet exist. Rumors trace its origins to the 1950s, after strange signals were detected that didn't match known satellites or radio interference. Some were dismissed. Others were rerouted to secret monitoring stations, locations you won't find on maps, but which show up in budget line items under telecommunications infrastructure. Places like Menwith Hill in the UK, Sugar Grove in West Virginia, and Pine Gap in Australia, all real facilities, all deeply classified, all rumored to have intercepted things they couldn't explain. But who were the men doing the listening? Some were linguists. Some were cryptographers. Some were just good at waiting. They sat in sealed rooms, headphones on, coffee cooling beside them, listening for the improbable, not static, but structure, not noise, but intent. And sometimes, something came. One declassified document from 1962 refers vaguely to non-attributable frequency anomalies. Another from 1974 notes a cascade burst, intercepted over the South Atlantic, with modulation patterns inconsistent with Earth-based transmitters. It was dismissed as sunspot activity, but notes in the margin suggest deeper concern. Repeat detection would warrant elevation. There was no repeat. Or so they said. What happens when you detect something but you can't explain it? You file it under unresolved. You tag it eyes only. And you make sure the public never hears a word. That's where the compartmentalization begins. Within intelligence networks, not all knowledge flows upward. Sometimes, it folds inward, layers upon layers. You might be the one monitoring the signal, but not the one who knows what it means. And so, the men kept listening. Year after year. Decade after decade. Some heard nothing. Others, according to second-hand memoirs and unconfirmed leaks, heard too much. There are tales of sudden shutdowns, entire monitoring stations abruptly sealed, personnel reassigned, files incinerated. One such event supposedly occurred in 1983 at a northern Canada site after the detection of a descending frequency spiral that lasted exactly 33 seconds. No official record of the incident exists. The building still stands, empty. What were they hearing? One theory posits that alien civilizations don't broadcast constantly, that they use directional bursts sent towards stars with promising planets. One signal, every 100 years. If you're listening at the right time, on the right day, on the right frequency, you hear it. If not, you miss it forever. That's why these men kept listening. Because what if we already received a signal, and just didn't notice? Or worse, noticed, and were told to forget? There's a kind of madness that comes with listening to silence for a living. Some of the men went quiet themselves. Some left their posts without explanation. Some, in retirement, scribbled odd diagrams and waveforms on napkins in diners, muttering about harmonics that didn't follow known laws. And always, there were rumors. That something was heard. That it wasn't meant to be. That it changed the men who heard it. Maybe the signal isn't stamp sound at all. Maybe it's a key. To memory. To perception. To something underneath what we think is real. These men weren't heroes. They weren't saints. But they were watchers. And watchers have burdens. Tonight, as your world grows quiet, imagine them, somewhere beneath the earth, headphones still on, monitors still glowing, waiting for something to echo from the stars. Maybe they sit still there. Maybe they heard more than they can ever say. So rest easy. They steer still listening. And maybe, something is listening back. It began with the end of a war. World War II had left the world shattered. Cities turned to rubble, secrets scattered like ash. But among those secrets were not just weapons, or political documents, or maps of destruction. There were scientists. German scientists. Some had built rockets. Some had studied aeronautics, chemistry, propulsion. And some had been studying something else entirely. In 1945, under a covert US intelligence program, now known as Operation Paperclip, over 1,600 of these German scientists and engineers were brought to the United States. Many had worked for the Nazi regime. Some had been high-ranking members of the SS. They weren't arrested. They weren't tried. They were given new names, new jobs, and in many cases, government housing and clearance. Why? Because they knew things. Some were placed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Others went to Fort Bliss, Los Alamos, or a strange desert site known as White Sands. They were tasked with advancing American rocketry and weapons development. That sips the official story. The unofficial one is stranger. Much stranger. Because among the classified files recovered from Germany were reports, deeply encoded, barely understood, about non-human craft. Discs. Lights. Objects that defied physics. And how the Nazis had tried to reverse engineer them. Documents referenced materials not found in the known elemental table. Sketches resembled modern depictions of UFOs, not because they copied them, but because the sightings had already happened. Some theories go further. They claim the Nazis recovered something. A craft, damaged or dormant, buried deep in ice or hidden in the Black Forest. Something ancient. Something alive. They didn't understand it. They couldn't control it, but they tried to build from it. They called it Die Glock, the bell. A device that spun violently, emitted high-frequency radiation, and may have been designed to bend space or time. The details are murky. Many involved died, others vanished. But what remains is obsession. And when the war ended, so did the research. But not forever. Because the United States, through Operation Paperclip, didn't just want rocket fuel. They wanted the blueprints. The fragments. The ideas no one wanted to admit were real. And they got them. Some of the imported scientists later worked at Area 51. Some assisted in MK-Ultra, the CIA's mind control program. Some contributed to silent aerospace projects that remain classified to this day. But always behind the scenes, there were whispers. That they weren't just chasing Soviet science. They were chasing something older. Something not human. One paperclip physicist, whose records were sealed until 1999, once scribbled in his lab journal a phrase that puzzled even historians. The metal sings when observed. No further context was given. Another, who later died of radiation poisoning, despite no exposure during wartime, had requested his body be cremated without autopsy, a request his family contested. The case was closed without explanation. And then there are the facilities. Massive underground complexes built in the 1950s and 60s, without clear funding sources, in places like Nevada, Utah, and the Carolinas, designed not for nuclear storage, but containment. With unusual features, rooms with no resonance, sloping walls, lead-lined ceiling grids, and soundproofing that blocks all known frequencies, including those used in military communications. What were they hiding? Or worse, what were they trying to understand? Many of the paperclip scientists died without ever speaking publicly. Some tried. Their interviews were redacted. Their families were told to stop asking questions, but a few documents slipped through the cracks. Declassified, damaged, but still legible. One reads, Recovered object incompatible with inertial framework. Responsive to observation. Exclusionary behavior noted when viewed directly. That sounds like conscious technology. And if that's what they brought back, not just ideas, but actual fragments of something beyond our science, then Paperclip wasn't just an operation. It was a pivot point in human history. A quiet turning of the wheel, where war ended not with peace, but with a new kind of war. One against the unknown. One fought not with guns but with silence. Because in the shadows of the Cold War, beneath the rockets and treaties, beneath the headlines and history books, there were secrets. And those secrets weren't always ours to begin with. It was never in the news. No photographs. No headlines. Just a story, persistent, whispered, and terrifying in its calmness. Some say the first real landing didn't happen in a field, or a desert, or even a military base. It happened on a ship. In 1983, somewhere in the South Pacific, a US Navy surveillance vessel reportedly picked up an unknown radar anomaly, an object that appeared out of nowhere, hovered precisely over the ocean for nearly 3 minutes, then descended into the sea without a splash. No sonic boom, no wreckage, just a vanishing blip. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't sped. Because hours later, according to unconfirmed but long-circulated internal reports, something surfaced. It wasn't SIT, a submarine. It wasn't STET, a whale. It was something else. Described as metallic, but organic-looking, smooth, oval, as large as a city bus, but completely silent. It rose from the ocean, hovered inches above the water, and approached the deck of the ship. That sips when the crew stopped talking. Not metaphorically. Literally. Several officers, previously recorded speaking over open channels, went completely silent. No screams, no gunfire, no warnings, just a steady audio feed filled with nothing but ocean wind. The logbooks from that night were reportedly sealed, and the crew was reassigned. Some retired. Some disappeared. One, according to a former Navy contractor, spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility in upstate New York speaking only in numbers, prime numbers, over and over. Of course, none of this was ever verified. And maybe that sips the point. But the story never went away. It drifted into forums, leaked documents, and hushed conference halls. Details always aligned. The same ship designation, the same coordinates, the same object, and always the silence. Some theorists call this the quiet contact event, a theory that Earth's first formal landing wasn't met with fanfare, but with confusion, that it wasn't reported, because there was nothing to report. No weapons fired, no words spoken, no dramatic display, just a ship, a light, a silent acknowledgement, then departure. This is the problem of contact. We imagine it like a movie, grand, explosive, undeniable. But what if it sits not? What if it sits subtle? What if it only happens to those who can't prove it? There's a deeper layer to this theory, that the object which surfaced wasn't just a craft, but a relay, a living probe. Something that scans, records, possibly even copies, not designed to communicate, but to understand. Some believe that the crew on that ship weren't silenced by force, but by something else. A temporary neural interruption, like a pause button pressed on the human brain. A field effect. A way of saying, this is not your time to speak. And what was left behind? Well, here the stories diverge. Some say nothing. The object disappeared, and the ship returned to port unchanged. Others say the ship returned with new cargo, an object stored in its lowest hold, never documented, never offloaded, only guarded, and then quietly moved to a location that doesn't exist on maps, escorted by black helicopters, then erased. A few even claim the ship was a decoy, that the entire event was staged to draw out the response from observers watching Earth from afar. Because, if we're being watched, then contact might not be about talking. It might be about testing. How do we respond? Who notices? What breaks? And maybe, just maybe, we failed the test. Because no one told the world. No one demanded answers. No one even knew. So, the landing, if it happened, remains hidden. Not lost. Just folded away, like a page in a book no one is supposed to read. And what about the crew? If they did see something, they never said. Or maybe they were told they imagined it. Maybe they came to believe it themselves. That's how disinformation works. Not by erasing truth, but by drowning it in doubt. Tonight, you don't need to believe. You only need to wonder. What happens when something not from this world lands and no one sees it? Or worse, only a few do, and can never tell. Let the waves take you. The ocean remembers. And so do the men who were told to forget. We always imagined ourselves as the watchers. The ones with the telescopes, the satellites, the eyes scanning the heavens. From the moment we launched our first machines into orbit, Earth became a planet with surveillance, not just against enemies, but against the unknown. But what if we weren't the only ones watching? Since the 1960s, space surveillance has expanded quietly, not just for tracking weather and weapons, but for logging unknown objects. Every now and then, something appears that shouldn't. A satellite that moves too fast. An object with no launch record. A flash that repeats, but doesn't correspond to any known signal. These are filed under anomalies, and then quietly removed. There's a story buried in the early Cold War archives. A supposed object dubbed Black Knight, first detected by radar in 1960, appearing to orbit Earth in a retrograde path, opposite of our planet's rotation. No country claimed it, no mission explained it. Photographs were taken. Military eyes turned toward the sky. Then silence. Officially it was dismissed, a piece of space debris or a misidentified satellite casing, but unofficially it earned a nickname, the Sentinel, because some believed it wasn't space junk. It was a watcher, and it had been there long before we went to space. Some orbital engineers claimed it changed position without fuel. Others said it emitted faint signals on a narrow band, just outside known communication channels. Nothing threatening, just watching. And then, it vanished. Not deorbited, not destroyed, just gone. Later, in 1986, during a mission aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger, an astronaut allegedly reported seeing a structure outside the window, not a craft, a frame, like scaffolding in space. It was brushed off as ice crystals or internal reflection. But the astronaut kept repeating, it was too symmetrical. He died later that year in the shuttle disaster. The tape from that mission was heavily edited before release. Coincidence, maybe, but maybe not. And now, with thousands of satellites in orbit, dozens of nations with access to space, and commercial cameras mapping every surface, surely we'd know if something was watching us, right? Not quite. Because most space surveillance is privatized or militarized. Public data is filtered. Anomalies are quietly removed. And yet, in 2013, an amateur astronomer in Chile captured a video of what appeared to be a large object orbiting Earth at a strange angle, stationary relative to the stars, but drifting slowly over hours. The footage went viral for a moment, then disappeared. Re-uploaded, removed, reposted again, but with errors, digital noise, edits inserted mid-frame. Some believe it was censored by code, not by deleting the file, but by corrupting the memory. Others say it sits still there. You just have to know where to look. The theory is this: that Earth has become a monitored planet. Not invaded, not colonized, just observed. Watched by things we don't recognize as machines. Structures that don't blink or emit heat. Orbs, frames, clouds, things that don't belong in orbit, but are there anyway. Some call them sentinels. Others, observers. Some say they're not technological at all, but biological, conscious, part of a larger organism we don't yet understand. Maybe we're not being watched from across the stars. Maybe we're being watched from just above our heads. There sits something deeply unsettling about that. Because we thought space was ours. Our telescopes. Our satellites. Our domain. But what if space was already occupied? Not by conquerors. Not by saviors. Just by watchers. And what do they see? Every launch. Every war. Every test. Every breath. They see us from above, not as individuals, but as a species. And they wait. Not to interfere. Not yet. Only to see if we notice them noticing us. And maybe that tips the real test. Do we look up and see stars? Or do we sense the watchers behind them? Close your eyes now. The sky is full. But not with light. With eyes. Some stories are so strange, so perfectly unbelievable, that they feel designed to be dismissed. This is one of them. His name, they say, was Valiant Thor. And according to the theory, he was not born on Earth, but Venus. Yes, that Venus. The scorched, cloud-choked planet we're told is inhospitable to life. And yet, the story goes that, in March of 1957, Valiant Thor landed his craft just outside Alexandria, Virginia, and walked calmly into the US Capitol, requesting a meeting with the president. He was greeted not with fear, but with deference. Because he already knew things. Names, procedures, passwords, and more unsettling, he spoke flawless English. Thor's arrival, as the story goes, led to direct contact with President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon. He wasn't alone, either. He was accompanied by a small team, described as human in appearance, but with slightly different bone structure, near-perfect skin, and a vibrational calm that unsettled everyone they met. For 3 years, Thor supposedly lived at the Pentagon. He had quarters, a uniform, clearance. He attended classified meetings, but always as an observer, never intervening, never commanding, never seen in public. What was he doing? According to retired military chaplain Dr. Frank Stranges, who claimed to have met him, his people, advanced in both technology and spiritual understanding, had been monitoring Earth and were concerned about our growing obsession with nuclear weapons and control-based governments. Thor came with an offer to share knowledge, clean energy, healing science, a path toward galactic citizenship. But the US government, or, more precisely, the shadow network operating behind it, declined. Why? Because peace, it turns out, isn't set to profitable. Strangers claimed that Thor had a lifespan of over 400 years, possessed telepathic abilities, and could phase through solid matter. He couldn't be detained, couldn't be harmed, and most critically, he never lied. There are photos. Or at least, what some claim are photos. A man in a black suit surrounded by military officials. Sharp jawline. Tall. Serene. Too serene. And his eyes, blank in a way that didn't look human, not hostile but other. Skeptics, of course, scoffed. Venus? Absurd. The surface temperature alone would melt any known material. No life could survive. No spacecraft could launch from there. But that's assuming Valiant Thor was from the Venus we understand. What if he, and others like him, live beneath the visible layers? Or in dimensions adjacent to planets we only see in 3 physical axes? Some theories propose that Venus, like several other planetary bodies, acts as a mirror gate, a facade concealing a higher dimensional realm, not visible to human instruments, a place that reflects light, but not truth. Under this theory, Thor wasn't set lying about Venus. He was revealing something we weren't ready to understand. And maybe we still aren't set. Strangers continued to tell his story for decades, never backing down, never changing the core details. Critics dismissed him as a fraud, but he never sought fame. He never published a bestseller. He simply insisted it happened. Others came forward in hushed tones. One former Pentagon aide recalled a man who spoke without moving his mouth. Another remembered hearing strange vibrations in the walls near a sealed room on the 4th floor, a room not listed on any floor plan. It was locked from the inside. And then, one day in 1960, Valiant Thor was gone. No departure, no statement, just absence. Some say he returned to his people. Others believe he still walks among us, appearing every few decades in a new suit, a new face, a new name, always calm, always watching, never intervening. And maybe that sips the stranger's part. If he was real, if the story holds even a grain of truth, then we had contact. And we said no. Not because we weren't set ready, but because we were afraid to change. Now, as your mind drifts toward rest, consider this. What if someone did come? What if they still do? And what if the only reason they remain hidden is because we prefer to forget? There are visitors we turned away, and some may still be waiting for us to call them back. Not all contact is remembered. That's the unsettling thought whispered at the edge of many abduction accounts. Not just that something happened, but that something was deliberately erased. The idea of missing time is common among those who claim to have experienced alien encounters. One moment they're walking to their car, or lying in bed, or driving down a quiet road, and the next, hours are gone. Their watch has moved, their clothes are disturbed, their sense of reality feels slightly bent, like a mirror that's been warped at the edges. But what if it's not just amnesia? What if something, or someone, wiped the memory on purpose? This theory has appeared in reports for decades. Abductees under hypnosis often recall seeing strange machines, bright lights, or beings placing devices on their heads or behind their ears. Others remember hearing a voice, not aloud, but inside them, calmly instructing them to forget. You once did remember. You were never here. Some believe this memory erasure is technological, a neurological override, like pressing delete on specific parts of the brain. Others suggest it's more psychological, using fear, suggestion, or even frequency manipulation to suppress conscious recall. But the strange part, it doesn't always work. People wake with fragments, dreams that aren't theirs, scars they can explain, a sense of being watched in their own minds. In 1992, a woman named Linda from Brooklyn reported waking up in the middle of the night standing outside her apartment building, barefoot, staring up at the sky. She had no memory of how she got there, just a ringing in her ears and the taste of metal in her mouth. She dismissed it as sleepwalking, until days later, her neighbor, a retired NYPD officer, knocked on her door and asked her, "What was that thing that took you?" He'd seen something, a glowing shape, silent, hovering by her window. He thought he imagined it, until he saw her rise into the air. He swore he hadn't touched a drink in months. He couldn't explain what he'd witnessed, and he never spoke publicly again. These stories multiply in the quiet places, in online forums, hypnotic therapy sessions, small-town newspapers, and whispered family secrets. The details differ, but the theme remains. Something happened. It was removed, and part of it came back. But here sits the deeper theory, the darker one. What if all of us have been contacted? Not abducted, not harmed, just touched, once, long ago, maybe as children, maybe in our dreams, maybe during moments we dismissed as déjà vu or a glitch in memory. And what if that contact was wiped, not because it was traumatic, but because it was important? Like sealing away a book before its time, like locking a door behind which truth sits waiting. Some believe memory wiping isn't just about forgetting, it's about delay, that certain people are marked to remember only when the time is right. That triggers, a sound, a pattern, a phrase, will unlock the sealed memory. Have you ever had a dream so real you woke up crying? Or looked at the stars and felt a pang of grief for something you couldn't name? Or met someone for the first time and thought, "I know you"? Some say these are symptoms of the erased moment beginning to return. And there sits more. In some declassified CIA documents from the 1970s, experiments were conducted in induced memory loss through electromagnetic exposure. Subjects reported time skips, gaps, emotional detachment. The documents claim the goal was psychological warfare. But some researchers believe the technology came from somewhere else. Reverse engineered, tested, not just to delete memories, but to mirror a process already being used against us. One whistleblower, writing under a pseudonym, claimed that the US government had recovered a small device in the 1960s, no buttons, no wires, just a smooth, oval, stone-like object that when held, caused users to lose time. Not blackout, not sleep, but simply forget. It was stored in a vault for years, then gone. No paper trail, no explanation. So if they have the technology, and if others do too, what does it mean for us? It means we may have met the visitors, and they chose not to let us remember. Or maybe they didn't choose at all. Maybe forgetting is part of the process, because memory is fragile, and the human mind is not built for certain truths. Some things, some knowledge, doesn't fit inside us, not yet. So they leave us with dreams, with scars, with stories that sound like madness, and with a silence that hides something enormous. As you drift into sleep, feel the blank space inside your memory. The one moment that always feels just out of reach. The shape behind the dream you never remember. Maybe it sits not gone. Maybe it was taken. And maybe it steps coming back. Most people imagine contact happening outside, in the sky, on the road, in a forest clearing beneath stars. But what if it happens indoors? And what if the place you're taken isn't a spaceship, but a room? White, cold, silent. Not sterile like a hospital, more like an absence of place, as if reality itself had been stripped down to its structural bones. No sharp edges, no doors, no lights, yet fully illuminated. This is the room described by hundreds of people across time, continents and belief systems. They call it the visitor room. Not a laboratory, not a prison, a waiting space. And in that room something comes. Many abductees describe being brought to such a space, but not by force. It's as if they simply wake up inside it. The walls feel soft to the eye, but cannot be touched. Some say the room adjusts to your thoughts, that it changes shape when you're afraid. That time bends differently there, a minute stretching into hours, or vanishing in a blink. And then, the visitors arrive. Not always in physical form. Sometimes, just a presence. Sometimes a tall figure in a long cloak with no face. Sometimes beings with large, black, depthless eyes. But the strangest descriptions are of humanoid versions of yourself. People who look almost like you but slightly off, as if built from memory, not flesh. Their voices don't come from mouths. Their mouths don't move at all. They speak in thought. And they ask questions. Not about Earth. Not about technology. About you. How do you define pain? What does time feel like to you? Do you believe in endings? Many who recall the room say they didn't feel afraid. Not exactly. More like exposed, as if the visitors were less interested in harming them and more interested in understanding something fundamental, something emotional, something about how humans work. Some recall being shown images, not pictures, feelings, experiences, entire lifetimes projected in seconds. Others claim the room was not just a place but a test, where their choices, thoughts, and fears were recorded, not judged, just observed. And then they were returned. Not to the place they left, but to the time they were taken from, often exactly 1 minute after. The clock doesn't move. The phone doesn't ring. The world doesn't notice. But they do. What makes the visitor room so eerie is how consistent the reports are. People from entirely different parts of the world, never exposed to each other's stories, describe the same room, the same stillness, the same feeling of being watched by something that isn't watching through eyes. One researcher, a psychologist specializing in anomalous trauma, compiled over 200 interviews. She noticed that patients who had never heard of alien abductions still described the same geometry, rounded corners, soft textures, an invisible wall behind them they couldn't pass through. She started calling it the default room, because it didn't feel built. It felt chosen, like a shared space outside space. A template. Some theorize it's not a room at all, but a construct of consciousness. A mental simulation projected into abductees' minds to give form to something formless, like a VR chamber for the soul. Others think it's real, physically real, and it's not in space or on Earth, but somewhere in between. There are even whispers among certain Black Ops communities of deep underground training rooms built to match these descriptions. For what purpose? Unknown. But one former contractor claimed that military intelligence had been trying to replicate the feeling of being inside it. Not the visuals, but the psychic pressure. He said, "You don't remember entering. You don't remember leaving. But something changed after. Something in your reflection." The visitor room is not about fear. It's about vulnerability. What happens when everything is stripped away? The story, the costume, the mind, and something else peers inside. What happens when you are known? Some say the visitor room is the first step in contact. Others say it's the final test. And some, quietly, believe it's where we go when we die, not to be judged, but to be archived, to be witnessed, by something that remembers every living thing. Maybe you been there. In a dream. In a moment, you can explain. In a memory you thought was just a flicker of imagination. Or maybe it sits waiting. In the cold corridors of intelligence agencies, where secrets pile like old bones, there was once a project that didn't involve guns, satellites, or spies. It involved the mind. It was called remote viewing, the alleged ability to see distant places, objects, or events using only consciousness, and for a time, it was taken very seriously. In the 1970s and 80s, the CIA and Department of Defense funded a program known as Stargate Project. It aimed to train psychic spies to gather information from across the globe. Some sessions targeted enemy bases, some looked for hostages, but some, the quiet, classified sessions, looked off-world. Because eventually, the viewers began to see things they weren't supposed to. Remote viewers worked in dark rooms with nothing but coordinates or blind targets. Sometimes they were told to focus on a date. Sometimes just a feeling. What they reported began to drift from conventional surveillance. One viewer, tasked with examining a location of strategic significance, described a structure beneath the Martian surface. He saw tall beings, frozen in stasis, a dying civilization waiting for rescue. The coordinates. They matched an actual location on Mars that would later appear in public satellite images, complete with curious formations. Another was asked to view a non-terrestrial presence influencing Earth. What he drew looked like a disk inside a mountain, with tunnels, glowing walls, and a network of symbols etched in stone. He didn't know what he was seeing, but he felt like it was seeing him. Many viewers began reporting the same thing. They were being watched back. One described it as an eye without emotion. Another said it felt like someone flipping pages through my thoughts. A few abruptly quit the program, not from fear of failure, but because something had looked into them. The files from these sessions are partially declassified. You can find transcripts with odd phrases. Presence acknowledged. Signal disrupted upon contact. Feedback loop initiated. Viewer lost target. Lost. As in unable to return to mental baseline. One viewer spent weeks unable to sleep, convinced he was hearing a tone embedded in silence, a soft pulse that wasn't sound, but invitation. What were they seeing? Some researchers believe that remote viewing accidentally tapped into a shared field of consciousness, one that includes non-human intelligences, that these entities don't exist in space as we understand it, but in mind space, in dimensions woven through perception itself. Others are more grounded, or more paranoid. They believe that the program stumbled onto real installations, and that the remote viewers glimpsed black sites, alien artifacts, or interspecies meeting points, guarded not by soldiers, but by psychic barriers. In either case, it was clear. Something was there, and it didn't stat like being watched. Eventually, Stargate was shut down, or so the story goes. But many believe it simply went deeper, that a breakaway group continued the work, no longer interested in earthbound intelligence, but in mapping what lies behind the curtain, the psychic architecture of reality. One alleged insider referred to it as echo-cartography, the idea that thoughts cast shadows, and those shadows form a map that leads to the watchers. And here's the strangest part. Remote viewers often agree on visual details of places they've never seen, and sometimes couldn't have imagined. Subterranean halls, lightless tunnels that hum with vibration, beings not shaped like anything in nature, but fluid, like forms made of emotion and structure at once. One described the sensation of seeing truth, and it looking back like it didn't need to blink. It's no wonder they stopped. Or had to stop. Because looking for aliens with telescopes is one thing, but using your mind as the antenna. That sips a doorway you can always close. And maybe, just maybe, some of those doors remain slightly ajar. So if you've ever felt that eerie tingle in the middle of the night, the sense that your thoughts aren't entirely your own, maybe it's not paranoia. Maybe someone glimpsed you. In a session. In a dream. In a moment they weren't supposed to see. Sleep gently now. You're still safe. But remember, somewhere, someone might still be listening. And sometimes, the thing you seek, seeks you back. Most stories end with a return. You to taken. You sit studied. You sit's changed. But you come back. That's the script. The rhythm of alien abduction tales. A brief departure from reality, then a restoration. The subject may be shaken, may carry scars or fragments of memory, but they are, fundamentally, returned. But not always. There are stories buried deep in the forums, the late-night radio archives, the cassette tapes passed hand to hand in the 1980s. Stories of people who weren't returned. Or who were, but only partially. One such case is known simply as the one who stayed. The subject, a man in his 40s from Utah, was camping alone when he vanished. His car was left locked. Food untouched. No signs of a struggle. After 3 weeks, he reappeared, walking barefoot down a remote highway, sunburnt but uninjured. But he was not the same. He didn't recognize his sister. He no longer spoke in full sentences. And he was terrified of mirrors. Doctors said trauma, memory loss, psychological dissociation. But in private, He repeated the same phrase over and over. I wasn't supposed to come back. His case file remained sealed under medical privacy protections, but a nurse who worked with him later claimed he had developed a sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. Lights would flicker when he entered a room, radios crackled, watches stopped. One night, he drew something on the wall of his hospital room, not a picture, a diagram, intricate, circular, layered, a pattern no one recognized, until a physicist visiting for unrelated reasons saw it and went silent. He later told a colleague, "It sips a model of a non-linear energy loop, but from the outside in." He wouldn't explain further. So what happened to him? The theory is simple. He wasn't brought back. He escaped. Some believe that abductions are not brief experiments, but attempts to keep certain individuals, not for torture or harm, but for study, preservation, observation, and sometimes the subjects resist. Those who are returned under these circumstances are changed. Others report similar oddities. A woman in Belgium was found wandering in the woods days after disappearing from her home. She spoke in a rhythmic, looping language, not gibberish, something structured. Analysts could not identify the syntax. She later drew a landscape she said was home, though she'd never seen it before. Twin suns, towering structures shaped like leaves, a sky that shimmered like water. She said, "They let me see it before they decided." Decided what? She never said. And then there sips the story of the twin boys from rural Argentina. In 1991, both vanished during a storm. One returned. The other never did. But the boy who came back insisted his brother was still with the light people. He said they kept him because he knew how not to forget. That line haunts researchers to this day. Because that sips the pattern. The ones who don't forget are often the ones who seem unwelcome upon return. Not by society, but by reality itself. They don't sit fit anymore. One man returned after 5 days, was discovered to have no dental records, despite having teeth. His fingerprints no longer matched his ID. His blood type was different than in his medical file. Doctors said paperwork error, but he said nothing. He just looked up at the sky and smiled. What if abductions aren't isolated? What if they sipped a recruitment? Or worse, replacements? Some theories suggest that in rare cases, the beings involved in abductions don't just observe, they extract, and something else comes back in the subject's place. A copy, a hollow, a test unit. Not hostile, just learning. Their debt's no way to prove it. But sometimes, someone you've known your whole life will pause before saying your name, will hesitate at a question they should know, will look at you with eyes that seem newly rented. And you wonder, are they back? Or are they still there, wherever there is, and something else is walking in their stead? Tonight, let your thoughts drift toward that blank space. The place no one comes back from. The corridor with no doors. The light that doesn't set warm. Maybe the scariest part isn't set being taken. It sits being sent back, unfinished. Sleep carefully. Not every story ends where it started. And some abductions stick. It's not just about what they see. It's about what we sit not allowed to say. Every serious alien contact theory, whether it involves abductions, crashed craft, or mysterious transmissions, eventually collides with the same quiet wall, the silence. The strange moment when radar operators go off record. When files vanish. When families stop asking questions because the answers never come, or because someone told them not to. This isn't about disbelief. It's about control. There's a term whispered among insiders. The silence protocol. An unspoken, unofficial response plan used when certain phenomena are detected. It doesn't appear in training manuals or public policy, but it's there, implied, reinforced, and always obeyed. It starts with denial, then redirection, then removal. When something appears in the sky, something without a transponder, without wings, without explanation, the first rule isn't to identify, it's to isolate. Isolate the footage. Isolate the witnesses. Isolate the story. In 2004, pilots from the USS Nimitz famously encountered what is now called the Tic Tac UFO, an object that defied all known physics, accelerating instantly, dropping thousands of feet in seconds, then vanishing. They reported it. They recorded it. And when they landed, They were greeted by men they didn't know, asking for the hard drives, asking for the tapes. No badges, no introductions, just authority. The footage was never meant to surface, but part of it did. Years later, a blurry video leaked and reluctantly confirmed by the Pentagon. But here sits the twist. That was the safe footage. The non-threatening version. The one allowed to exist. Other data, according to insiders, was deleted, or buried, or quietly reclassified. The silence protocol had already done its work. Why? Not because people can't handle the truth, but because governments can't control the outcome. Because if a single verified moment of contact were accepted as real, not just theorized or debated, but institutionalized, it would unravel far more than belief systems. It would unravel power. So instead of disclosure, we get mockery. TV shows about little green men. Cartoons. Tabloid headlines. Laughter. Laughter is the first line of defense. If they can make it funny, they don't have to make it true. But the protocol doesn't just exist at the top. It filters downward, into air traffic control towers, naval reports, even civilian eyewitness encounters. People are told to shut up, sometimes gently, sometimes not. There are dozens of stories from small-town officers, firemen, emergency personnel, people who witnessed strange things and then received the call. Let it go. Don't write that down. Do you really want your job tied to this? And in that moment, they don't need threats. They just need doubt. Doubt is quieter than violence. It lasts longer. It spreads faster. And then, the silence deepens. Even families of abductees feel it. People come back changed, tired, disconnected, eyes distant, but no one talks about it. The doctors shrug. The police lose the report. Friends avoid the subject. It's not denial. It's compliance. And maybe it didn't start with us. Some theorists believe the silence protocol isn't even human in origin. That long ago, after a first contact, one that went badly, we were given a simple instruction. Do not speak. A warning. A barrier. A kind of psychic treaty. And every time that line is crossed, every time someone speaks too clearly, remembers too much, leaks too deep, they are silenced. Not always by force. Sometimes, it's just a strange illness. A sudden car crash. Or a disappearance no one questions. Other times, it's stranger. Memory holes. Dreams that erase details. Files that delete themselves. Because maybe the protocol isn't just policy. Maybe it's embedded. Like a program hidden in human consciousness. Not to prevent contact, but to prevent witnessing. So we joke. We forget. We look away. Not because we stir weak, but because we have been taught. If you speak too clearly, you disappear. Tonight, speak softly. Think quietly. The silence may not be your enemy, but it might be watching. A name whispered in classified briefings, dismissed in press releases, and written across documents marked top secret, eyes only. There's a name that echoes through every conspiracy theory about alien contact. Majestic 12. Also known as MJ-12. This alleged group is said to have been formed by President Truman in 1947, just after the Roswell incident. 12 men, scientists, military leaders and intelligence operatives, handpicked to manage, conceal and control all information regarding extraterrestrial life. Officially, Majestic 12 doesn't exist. Unofficially, it sips everywhere. But then, it wasn't dismissed outright. It was explosive, unbelievable, possibly faked. The legend began in 1984, when a roll of undeveloped film arrived anonymously at the home of UFO researcher Jaime Shandera. When processed, it revealed a briefing document addressed to President Eisenhower. It detailed the formation of MJ-12, their duties, and their conclusions about crashed alien vehicles and recovered bodies. They said, "We can neither confirm nor deny." And that was enough. The US government didn't say, "This is nonsense." They referenced codenames. Over the next decades, more documents surfaced. Memos, orders, internal briefings. Some were proven forgeries. Others remain unproven but uncategorically compelling. Operation Majestic. Project Aquarius. Sigma Protocol. One memo outlined an incident in 1954, where a live entity was supposedly kept under observation for 3 years. It spoke in symbols, drew maps of star systems unknown to science at the time, and eventually stopped communicating. The story ends there. They described biological entities labeled EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, and attempts to communicate using both sound and telepathy. Because if MJ-12 was real, then every other denial, every weather balloon, every missing file, every silenced witness, becomes not chaos but orchestration. Or rather, goes deeper. A system, a mechanism, a well-oiled structure designed to do one thing: keep the secret intact. Skeptics say the documents were planted as a hoax, a Cold War experiment to test disinformation channels. But if that were true, why were some of the scientists named in the documents later confirmed to have worked on actual classified aerospace projects? Why did several die shortly after the documents were leaked? Why do FOIA Freedom of Information Act requests referencing MJ-12 return with redacted pages, if it's just fiction? And then there sips the psychological side. Multiple insiders have reported dreams after reading MJ-12 material, recurring ones. Similar settings, a white hallway, a metal door with no handle, a woman SIP's voice repeating, "You are not authorized." One retired intelligence officer claimed that certain MJ-12 documents were embedded with conceptual triggers, that reading them activates something, even if you don't realize it. That they're not just information, they're a test. Those who believe, who dig, who start to connect the dots, they begin to feel it. The feeling that something is watching the watcher. Writers, researchers, whistleblowers. One of the more controversial files references a backup Majestic unit, a team responsible not for managing alien secrets, but for managing the people who uncover them. Not eliminated, redirected, discredited, silenced through noise, not violence. Because that sips the genius of it. If you scream the truth from a mountaintop, but no one listens, have you really spoken at all? That sips what MJ-12 does, if it exists. Not cover up the aliens, but bury the reality in so many contradictions, leaks, hoaxes and theories that truth dissolves into noise. Others believe the original 12 are long dead, and were never human to begin with. Some say MJ-12 still meets, not in bunkers but in digital silos, AI-assisted forums, deep intranets with no names. That the group wasn't created by Truman, but by them. To manage us. To study our response to them. Our denials, fears, myths. What if we were the ones being tested? And what if the test is still happening? Somewhere, 12 empty chairs might still sit around a table no one admits exists. And somewhere else, they're still watching. Majestic. And silent. Most stories of alien contact revolve around the same themes: lights in the sky, abductions, surveillance. We're the watchers, the victims, the confused species staring upward. But what if, just once, the script was flipped? What if we didn't just receive visitors? We sent someone back? This is the heart of one of the strangest, most elaborate theories in UFO lore. Project SERPO. The story first surfaced in 2005, on a private UFO email list, an anonymous source claiming to be a retired employee of the US Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA leaked documents and testimony about a secret interstellar exchange program between Earth and an alien race from the Zeta Reticuli star system, the same binary star pair linked to the alleged 1961 abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. According to the leaked documents, an extraterrestrial craft crashed in Roswell in 1947, but not all occupants died. One survived. It, or rather, he, was kept alive and eventually made contact with his home planet. In 1965, after years of preparation, the US government selected 12 American military personnel to embark on a mission, travel aboard an alien craft to the homeworld of the beings, a planet known only as SERPO. 8 men and 2 women reportedly completed the journey. The trip took 10 months, during which the Earthlings were said to be suspended in a form of stasis to withstand relativistic space travel. When they arrived, they were greeted not as prisoners or specimens but as guests. The planet was hot, dry, with 2 suns. Days lasted longer than on Earth. The atmosphere was breathable, but caused health issues for some. 1 member died shortly after arrival. 2 chose to remain permanently. The rest stayed for 13 years. And when they returned, they brought back data. Over 3,000 pages of it. Astronomy, sociology, biology, physics, even cultural records from an entirely different species. But they were never heard from again. According to the theory, they were debriefed, quarantined, and then quietly reassigned or retired under new identities. Some died of radiation-related illnesses. Others simply vanished. The public would never know. The documents leaked by the anonymous DIA insider described SERPO as a planet of low population, highly communal society, and advanced technology. The beings called Ebens were described as peaceful, deeply curious, and utterly non-human in cognition. They didn't understand lying. They didn't wage war. They valued experience over hierarchy. In short, they weren't SIP, just more advanced. They were more evolved. The idea of Project SERPO struck many as outlandish. And yet, some details were strangely convincing. Descriptions of orbital mechanics around Zeta Reticuli matched known data, radiation exposure levels on the supposed SERPO surface, aligned with symptoms described by the returning team, and voice stress analysis on the alleged whistleblower showed no signs of deception. Still, no photos, no physical proof, just documents, testimony, and a chilling implication. We were part of something bigger, and we blew it. Because if this exchange program happened, if we were truly guests on an alien world, why haven't we been invited again? Some theorists believe the program ended due to disagreement, that human emotions, jealousy, fear, suspicion, made the Abens uncomfortable. Others say the two who chose to stay violated protocol, and future exchanges were cancelled as a result. And then there steps the quietest theory, that the SERPO team never came back. That what returned was a reconstruction, a mirror of the originals, carefully built from memory and DNA, but lacking something essential that the government realized the visitors had studied us too well. And it scared them. So the files were sealed, the project disbanded, and the names of the 12 erased from every record. Some point to brief mentions in declassified DIA budget reports, odd expenditures labeled containment logistics, and non-terrestrial archival support. Others mention that between 1978 and 1982, 10 senior Air Force officers were quietly reassigned to remote locations with no clear duties. And one name, just one, matches both the SERPO leak and a real personnel record, but with a death certificate dated 2 years before the alleged return. What if it SIP's all true? What if the greatest moment in human history, our first interstellar step, happened in secret? And what if we lost the chance to ever go again? As you fall into sleep, imagine it. A barren world beneath twin suns. A group of humans walking through alien soil, learning, failing, watching something beyond comprehension float silently above a horizon we'll never see. And then, coming home, but not quite whole. It's easy to forget how strange the moon really is. It hangs above us every night, silent, ancient, familiar, but beneath that quiet glow lies one of the most persistent whispers in the world of alien contact theory. Something is already there. The moon, some say, is not just a satellite, it's a station, a monitor, a base. And at the heart of that theory is one detail that refuses to go away: the missing signals. When Apollo missions first traveled to the moon in the 1960s and 70s, communication was constant. NASA monitored everything: telemetry, heart rates, onboard systems, voice transmissions. Public broadcasts let the world listen in real time. But not all of it was public. Between July 20th and 21st, 1969, during Apollo 11's historic landing, there was a brief period where transmissions went dark. Officially, it was due to a switch in antennas, but years later, a former NASA engineer confessed, off record, that during that window, the astronauts reported seeing something on the rim of a nearby crater. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong allegedly described structures, lights, and movement. The story goes that their words were transmitted over a backup channel, reserved for internal use, and what they said was recorded, but never released. NASA denied the claim. The tapes, they said, either never existed or were misplaced. But the rumors only grew. A ham radio operator in Australia claimed to have intercepted the live feed during that transmission gap, and what he heard was not silence. He reported hearing one astronaut say, "They sit here. They sit watching us." Of course, this could be fiction, or distortion, or a hoax. But it sits not the only anomaly. During later Apollo missions, astronauts reported hearing what they called space music, eerie, unexplainable tones that echoed through their headsets when passing behind the far side of the moon, out of contact with Earth. NASA SERP's explanation? Electromagnetic interference. But recordings later analyzed by independent engineers found structured frequency patterns, suggesting not random interference, but intentional modulation. In other words, a signal from the moon. And then there sits the strange case of the moon bounce tapes. In 1973, a classified experiment aimed to bounce high-frequency signals off the moon's surface to test deep space communication. The signals returned, but with extra data embedded. Unexplained pulses, packets of unknown origin. The technicians thought it was a glitch, until they realized the frequency had slightly shifted, as if something in between had modified the signal. The tapes were stored, then redacted, then erased. But one was copied. It surfaced decades later in a private UFO research archive. The sound is available online. A low, rhythmic thrum with occasional high-pitched pulses. No language, no pattern anyone can decipher. Yet some listeners describe a strange reaction. Goosebumps. Dizziness. Dreams the night after. A sound you can't explain, but can't quite forget. Other reports have emerged from amateur astronomers, who claimed to see lights moving across the lunar surface, not meteors, not reflections, but points of light that change direction, vanish, then reappear. Some believe there are docking ports hidden in permanently shadowed craters. Others say the moon is hollow, a shell constructed long ago, its orbit too perfect, its size too coincidentally aligned with the sun during eclipses to be natural. NASA denies all of this. Naturally. But the number of redacted files about the moon is disproportionately large, particularly around radio communication and signal research. Why censor static? Unless the static isn't set random. Unless the moon is transmitting. And what if it sips not just a base? What if it sips a receiver? A device positioned to pick up signals not from Earth, but from somewhere else, far beyond, meant to pass through us like light through a lens. And what if we were never meant to hear it? There's a theory that human consciousness is just sensitive enough to feel what the moon is hearing, that in dreams, in sudden awakenings, in long silences where your mind drifts and suddenly becomes afraid for no reason, that's when you're brushing up against the signal. And maybe it sips not just a broadcast. Maybe it sips a presence. Constant. Quiet. Waiting. So tonight, look up. Let your eyes blur. Let the moon become more than a rock. Let it become a question. And know that somewhere, under the dust and the silence, something may be listening back. It should have been just another ranch. Tucked away in the Utah desert, Skinwalker Ranch sits on 512 acres of quiet land, surrounded by scrub brush, red rock, and distant mesas. Nothing about it should stand out, but it does, because for decades, it's been the epicenter of everything strange. UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, disappearing animals, time distortions, portals, entities without names or shapes, and perhaps most chilling of all, intelligence. Not just phenomena, but something that reacts, learns, watches. The ranch takes its name from Navajo legends, the Skinwalkers, being said to shift between human and animal form, often associated with witchcraft and forbidden knowledge. But the legends aren't about aliens. They're about something older, darker, rooted in land and blood. So why does this place, of all places, feel like a node in the alien contact web? Because the deeper you go, the less the categories matter. UFOs appear above cattle pens. Light orbs chase vehicles and fry electronics. Creatures step out of shadows, only to vanish in mid-air. And when people try to record it, the phenomena respond. In the 1990s, the ranch was purchased by a wealthy aerospace magnate named Robert Bigelow, who founded the National Institute for Discovery Science (NIDS). His team included physicists, biologists, military intelligence experts. Their mission? Investigate. Catalog. Understand. But the results were baffling. One scientist reported seeing a tunnel of light open above a field, and something crawl out. Another watched a cow die within minutes, its internal organs removed without a single drop of blood spilled. Surveillance cameras were installed, and then disabled by invisible forces. Laptops erased, hard drives corrupted. And always, the sense of being watched. Not just by cameras, by something invisible but present. The NEDS team eventually left. They couldn't contain it, couldn't measure it, couldn't predict it. It acted with purpose, with awareness, with intent. The ranch changed hands again, and a new wave of investigations began, this time with more advanced tech, ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, drone sweeps. But the same thing happened. The phenomena adapted. They never repeated. They never performed on cue. They waited. And then struck, not with violence, but with uncertainty. A man would find his compass spinning in circles. A scientist would black out, only to wake up with strange puncture wounds. Time would warp. People would report missing hours, or see the same event replay. But perhaps the most haunting report came from a physicist who said the ranch wasn't haunted, and it wasn't visited. It was alive. He described it as an interface point, a place where reality thins and something else presses against it. Something that isn't necessarily alien in the spacecraft sense, but non-human in origin. Some call it an intelligence field. Others, a dimensional leak. A place where the boundaries between self and other, dream and matter, inside and outside, begin to dissolve. And that's what makes Skinwalker Ranch so important to the alien contact narrative. Because what if contact doesn't require spaceships? What if it sips topological? What if there are places where the veil lifts, and what we call aliens are just the visible tip of a much larger force? Not visitors. Not invaders. Inhabitants. Of a reality we barely brush against. A place like Skinwalker Ranch might not be an alien base. It might be a keyhole. A liminal zone where different modes of existence briefly overlap. And if you stand in that zone, even for a moment, the rules change. Time slips. Distance breaks. Thought becomes signal. And you stir not just observed, you stir read. So why hasn't the world paid more attention? Because everything there is ambiguous. It defies categories. It makes no sense. And that's the point. It's not here to prove itself. It's here to teach us that not everything can be proven. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine walking through a silent field under desert stars. You feel it before you see it. A shift. In the air, in your skin, in your thoughts. And somewhere behind you, something steps just close enough to be known, but never enough to be named. Time is supposed to move in one direction. That sips the rule. That sips the comfort. Past, present, future, clean, linear, dependable. But every so often, someone walks into a place and walks out in a different time. These are called time slip reports. And while they're often filed under folklore or glitch in the matrix stories, a growing number of researchers believe they may be connected to alien contact, not in the traditional sense of flying saucers or abduction, but in the way time itself is manipulated, and sometimes broken. The most famous modern case comes from Liverpool, England, in the early 1990s. A man named Frank was walking down Bold Street when he suddenly found himself surrounded by old cars, outdated shop signs, and people dressed as if it were the 1950s. The atmosphere was heavy, muffled. He could hear his footsteps more clearly than the voices of others. He walked past a store window and saw his reflection. But the background behind him didn't match the street he was on. And then, like flipping a switch, everything was back. Normal, loud, present day. He later verified that the store he'd seen, Cripps, a long-defunct business, had indeed operated there decades earlier, with the same signage. Frank never believed in UFOs, but he always said, something bent time. And it's not an isolated story. All over the world, people report brief shifts, seconds, minutes, even hours, where reality seems to run parallel to another version of itself. Some describe landscapes that don't exist. Others report entire conversations with people who later vanish. But what makes these incidents relevant to alien contact theories? It's the locations. Many time-slip events occur in high strangeness zones, areas already associated with UFO sightings, electromagnetic anomalies, and entity encounters. Places like Sedona, Arizona, the Bennington Triangle in Vermont, Mount Shasta, California, the Hessdalen Valley in Norway. Researchers have mapped these zones and found overlapping reports of missing time, light anomalies, and even aural distortions, like hearing voices before an event or a humming that rises and falls just before a shift. Some believe these are accidental tears in reality. Others think they're intentional experiments, tests conducted by non-human intelligences using reality as a malleable material. A particularly eerie account surfaced from a man hiking in the Andes. He claimed to have encountered a strange structure hidden in a rock formation, a doorway made of pinkish stone humming faintly. When he touched it, he felt weightless and saw a flash of a city of light far beyond the mountain. He came to several hours later, 30 kilometers away from where he started. No injuries, no memory of the hike, only a lingering image of tall beings standing in stillness behind glass that wasn't glass. He now dreams in a language he doesn't speak. Another case involves a woman in New Zealand who awoke one morning in a house she didn't recognize. Furniture unfamiliar, decor outdated. She panicked, then saw her reflection. She was younger. Moments later, she blinked and was back in her bed. But the scar on her cheek, which she hadn't had for 20 years, was gone. Skeptics call these hallucinations, stress, sleep paralysis, dissociative events. But what if they scepter intrusions? What if these time slips are side effects, symptoms of something larger? A few fringe theorists believe time slips occur when reality is being overwritten, like editing a file while it's still open. They suggest that certain alien presences don't travel through space at all, but through versions of time, hopping between timelines where contact succeeded, or failed, or never happened. And sometimes, just sometimes, we catch a glimpse of the wrong version. One physicist turned whistleblower once said, "They don't set to arrive, they emerge." Think about that. What if the alien phenomenon isn't coming from the stars, but from nearby time, just out of sync with ours? What if every strange disappearance, every reappearing building, every phantom landscape is a leak from another clock, a world slightly ahead, or just behind? So when someone vanishes for a moment, or reappears confused, or claims they walked into the past, maybe they're not wrong. Maybe they just wandered into someone else's now. And if time is soft in some places, if it bends like cloth and frays at the edges, then contact may not happen in time. It may happen to time. So sleep gently. Your dreams are not always memories. Sometimes they're postcards from timelines that touched yours, just long enough to leave a trace. And maybe, just maybe, something from there is still walking beside you. Not all alien stories involve fear. Not all encounters are cold and clinical. Some feel like invitations. That's the tone of the Nordic alien theory, one of the oldest and most peculiar threads in the tapestry of contact lore. Unlike the Greys or Reptilians, who are often described as emotionless or predatory, the Nordics are said to be tall, luminous, and almost impossibly beautiful. Blonde hair, pale skin, blue eyes that seem to glow. They wear white or silver, and they don't sit abduct. They speak. Sometimes with words, sometimes with something deeper. Telepathy, intuition, a resonance that echoes in the mind like a remembered dream. The first widespread reports emerged in the 1950s, when so-called contactees like George Adamski claimed to have spoken with benevolent beings from Venus. Critics mocked the idea, but Adamski wasn't alone. Dozens of others, from housewives in rural Sweden to farmers in Argentina, began describing similar figures. The Nordics said they were here to help, to guide humanity away from destruction, to warn us about nuclear war, ecological collapse and spiritual decay. They rarely gave names, but one phrase recurs across multiple encounters. We are the watchers of the watchers. What does that mean? Some interpret it to mean the Nordics are interveners, not the ones doing the abductions but the ones trying to stop them, a balancing force, a third party in an unseen cosmic negotiation. Others say they are future humans, evolved from us, returning to nudge us away from catastrophic paths. Their genetic similarity, their humanoid form, their soft-spoken concern, all suggest origin, not invasion. But the strangest theory? That the Nordics' dumb sect come from space at all. That they live here, in hidden bases beneath the Arctic ice, in remote mountains or beneath the ocean. Earthbound, but not earthborn. Some experiencers report being taken to crystal chambers, not spacecraft, rooms of light. Others speak of being shown Earth from orbit, not through a window, but through the mind. And always, the message is the same. Your species is not ready, but it is loved. Why would that be threatening? Because love implies judgment, choice, a decision to help or not. And maybe they haven't yet decided. The term liaison appears in classified Air Force files dating back to 1962, referring to unverified foreign entities of advanced capability and familiar appearance. The files are mostly redacted, but one sentence survives. Liaison Group offered assistance contingent upon demilitarization of orbital zone. Denied. If that's real, it means the Nordics made contact. And we said no. And maybe we've been paying for that decision ever since. There are rumors, always rumors, of individuals who've lived with them. Ambassadors, emissaries, people who disappeared for years, only to return with vague memories of cities without walls, languages that sing, machines that respond to thoughts. One man claimed he spent 7 years aboard a Nordic vessel before returning to his rural home. He said their ships don't fly, they fold, that inside, there's no gravity, only intention, and that every room is alive, responsive, glowing, filled with an energy that feels like being hugged by the universe. He never wrote a book, never gave a speech. He just waited for them to return. Some say the Nordics appear in dreams before disasters, as if trying to prepare selected minds for what's to come. Others say they're the source of the old myths, angels, gods, luminous visitors from the sky who came not to rule, but to warn. They never force belief. They don't need to. Because once you've seen them, people say, you never quite believe anything else again. The world feels thinner. Like you've seen behind the curtain. And what you saw wasn't terrifying. It was sad. Because you know what we could be. And you know we're not there yet. Tonight, imagine this. A figure at the edge of your dream. Eyes like mirrored oceans. Hands that never touch, but reach just close enough for you to understand. And then, a whisper. We are near, but you must choose. Sleep peacefully. The liaison may not come in the night, but the decision is already being made. And maybe, it sits yours. It sits the coldest place on Earth. A continent of silence. Of ice so ancient it remembers things no living human can. Antarctica. A place so remote, so inhospitable, that we often forget how little we truly explored it. But among the most persistent whispers in the alien contact world is this. Something is beneath the ice. And it may not be sleeping. In 1996, a strange satellite reading caught the attention of geophysicists. A series of magnetic anomalies beneath Lake Vostok, one of the largest subglacial lakes on Earth. The lake lies buried under more than 2 miles of solid ice, untouched by sunlight for millions of years. But the magnetic readings didn't match geology. They resembled structure. Something angular, symmetrical, artificial. Official expeditions were halted. The lake remained sealed, and then, the rumors began. A Russian researcher reportedly went missing after entering a borehole drilled into the lake. His team was airlifted out. No official explanation, just whispers of odd sounds, voices, equipment behaving as if gravity had twisted sideways. And then there sips the signal. In 2002, a US satellite passing over Queen Maud Land picked up a pulsing narrowband transmission. Not natural, not military. It originated from deep beneath the ice shelf, from coordinates that matched no known station or installation. The signal lasted 1 minute, 43 seconds. Then silence. Attempts to replicate or trace it failed. The file was classified, but a researcher leaked a fragment. It sounds like a heartbeat, distant, rhythmic, metallic, like something breathing beneath the earth. It became known among fringe circles as the echo of the ice. And it sips not alone. In recent years, pilots flying over the interior have reported seeing black geometric shapes carved into icebergs, like doors with no path. Satellite images are scrubbed regularly, but amateur sleuths have managed to capture before and after comparisons, showing objects moved or erased. Some believe there's a massive installation buried in the ice. Not built by humans. Not even built for humans. A structure that predates civilization, or that was never part of it to begin with. The Nazi expedition of 1938 to Antarctica, a historical fact, has only added fuel to this theory. Records show they mapped parts of Queen Maud Land and named it Neuschwabenland. Some suggest they found something there, and that post-war operations like High Jump in 1946 were not for training, but for containment. Admiral Richard Byrd, who led Operation High Jump, later spoke cryptically of objects that could fly pole to pole at impossible speeds. He died under strange circumstances. His diaries were never released, and the question remains, what is under the ice? Some say it sips a craft. Others, a portal. A place where the fabric between worlds has thinned to a whisper. There are even rumors of beings sighted by underground sonar, massive, slow-moving shapes that don't match biology or physics. One theory holds that Antarctica was once a hub, not of alien activity, but of ancient human contact. That civilizations long lost were guided, lifted, and perhaps even altered by something not quite of this world, before being buried in frost. And perhaps now, as the ice melts and the ground groans beneath global heat, that something is stirring. But here sips the quietest detail. Those who have visited the deeper research stations, the ones without names, often return changed, not traumatized, not damaged, just quiet. They stop talking about what they saw. They stop dreaming. One researcher confessed, under hypnosis, to hearing a voice every night beneath the ice. It said, "You stir standing on the ceiling." Interpret that how you will. Maybe Antarctica is a cage, or a mirror, or a vault built not to keep us out, but to keep something in. And as we dig, drill, and melt our way deeper, maybe we're not uncovering truth. Maybe we sit here unlocking it. So tonight, listen closely. Do you hear it? A low echo, a pulse, a presence that's not quite sound. It steps cold, but not dead. And it may be listening. Not every message comes through machines. Some arrive in silence, in sleep, in the fragile space between thought and memory, where the mind softens and something else steps in. There is a theory, whispered among psychologists, neurologists and experiencers alike, that alien contact doesn't always happen in the sky, but in the subconscious. In dreams. But not just any dreams. These aren't flights of fancy or leftover mental clutter. They're vivid, structured, recurring, and, more importantly, shared. People across the world, strangers in different countries, cultures and time zones, have reported eerily similar dreams. A sky filled with silent, hovering objects. A voice that doesn't speak in words, but is understood completely. A countdown. A return. Some wake up gasping, with tears streaming down their face. Not in fear, but in recognition. As if remembering something long forgotten. Or something they were never supposed to know. Researchers call them arrival dreams. And they often begin young. Children describe glowing rooms, tall figures who look both human and not. They speak of being taken to school, not in the literal sense, but shown visions, patterns, colors that have no name. These children often grow up with heightened intuition, sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, or an unshakable sense that they are being prepared. Prepared for what? That sips the part they can never say. Only that it's coming. In one study, a sleep therapist recorded over 200 patients describing near-identical dream symbols, spiraling lights, staircases to nowhere, doorways without walls. None of these patients had met. None were UFO enthusiasts. Most were skeptical, even confused. And yet, when shown sketches from each other's descriptions, they cried. It was the same place. They all dreamed of the arrival city, not futuristic, not alien in the cinematic sense, but calm, glowing, with architecture that seemed to sing when touched. Some described rooms that showed them memories that didn't belong to them. Others stood at windows, watching Earth from above. The implication was clear. They weren't sit dreaming. They were visiting, or being visited. And then there are the countdowns. Many report dreams of clocks, not traditional ones. Abstract, fractal, shifting, sometimes numbers, sometimes symbols, always moving towards zero. What happens at zero? They never find out. They always wake up before. One man in Finland claimed he had the same dream every night for 6 years. A smooth obsidian tower descending into a wheat field. A crowd stands in silence. No one speaks. And then, just as the tower touches the ground, he wakes. One night, the tower touched down. He never dreamed again. He also disappeared 2 months later. His apartment, undisturbed. His phone unplugged. His calendar filled out 6 months ahead. Gone. Coincidence? Perhaps. But he SIP's not the only one. There are patterns. People who dream of arrival often find themselves increasingly disconnected from normal life. They drift, they change careers, they move to remote places without knowing why. Some claim to be waiting for a signal. Others feel that when the time comes, they'll know what to do. Skeptics call it psychological imprinting, a modern myth expressed through dream archetypes. But others say dreams are not imagination. They SIP interface, because maybe direct contact would shatter the mind. Maybe a soft approach, through symbols, memory, dream, is the only way we can handle truth. And maybe that SIP's why some dreams feel so real. Because they are. You may have had one yourself. A strange light outside your window. A wordless voice asking a question you still can't remember. A place you know you've never seen, but somehow recognize. Maybe that SIP's not your brain making it up. Maybe that SIP's you remembering. Arrival doesn't it always mean ships. Sometimes it means ideas. Planted softly. Watered slowly. Until one night, they bloom. And you wake up changed. So as you drift now, listen to the dream forming behind your eyes. Is it a memory? A message? Or something sent ahead? A dream seeded by something watching, waiting, already here. Sleep deeply. They may arrive tomorrow. But they SIP already visited tonight. It happens in the most ordinary moments. You say driving a familiar road, walking through a store, sitting quietly in your room. Then, a blink, a breath, a thought interrupted. And when you check the clock, hours have passed. You don't feel groggy. You don't remember sleeping. But something is missing. And you know it. This is what experiencers call missing time, one of the most universal and chilling elements in alien contact narratives. Unlike dreams or sightings, missing time isn't about what was seen. It SIPs about what was not remembered. It SUPs the void that follows contact. The silence that surrounds something too strange, too large, or too intentional to be processed. In one of the earliest documented cases, a couple driving home from a rural New Hampshire vacation in 1961 noticed a bright object in the sky. The next thing they remember, they were 35 miles further down the road, confused, disoriented, and 3 hours later than expected. They were Betty and Barney Hill, the first widely publicized alien abduction case in the United States. What surfaced under hypnosis months later was shocking. Beings. A craft. Tests. A sense of floating. Of helplessness. And then, nothing. Their case opened the floodgates. Suddenly, people everywhere, teachers, pilots, nurses, engineers, began coming forward with similar stories. They didn't see little green men. They didn't want fame. They just wanted to understand why 3 hours vanished from their lives. Some were found standing motionless in fields. Others woke up in their beds wearing different clothes. One woman awoke in her driveway, still holding her grocery bags. All of them melted. The theory is simple and terrifying. Something happens. And then someone removes the memory. But only partially. Because missing time is rarely smooth. It leaves echoes. Flashbacks. Sudden panic in certain locations. Recurring dreams of lights, tables, tall shapes that lean in and tilt their heads. One man, after experiencing a missing time event while hiking, began drawing fractals, detailed geometric shapes far beyond his education or artistic ability. When asked why, he simply said, "I've seen their language." Another, a teenager from Oregon, would fall asleep and wake up with dirt on her feet and bruises in shapes resembling glyphs. Doctors found nothing wrong until she stopped sleeping altogether. She said the dreams weren't set dreams. They were lessons. And she was failing them. Missing time is often accompanied by physical symptoms. Nosebleeds. Ringing ears. Unexplained scars. Implants. Tiny metallic fragments found beneath the skin that resist surgical removal or vanish before testing. And always, the feeling of being observed. Not watched. Observed. Some theorists believe these episodes are not random, they are scheduled. That contact doesn't occur by chance, but by design, and that the memory erasure, or suppression, is part of a larger program. One aimed not at harming, but at harvesting something we don't understand. Not organs, not cells, but information. Experiences. emotions, responses, like subjects in a long-term experiment where the test is not what happens but how we live after it, unaware of what was taken. The deeper theory? That we all have missing time. Not just once or twice, but regularly. That, what we call daydreaming or zoning out, is sometimes a brief extraction, a checkpoint in a larger process. And if so, what are they learning? There are files, redacted and forgotten, from intelligence programs studying brainwave interference, memory disruption, and post-contact amnesia. One memo, dated 1978, mentions a phrase that has since become infamous. The body is returned. The narrative is not. Narrative. As if life itself is a story, and parts of it are being edited. If time is a recording, missing time is a cut. A moment deleted from the final version. But the pause button didn't set to erase the sensation. It left a scar in the timeline. So if you ever looked at the clock and felt cold, if you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you entered, if you ever had a night where you felt like you slept too perfectly, maybe it wasn't rest. Maybe you were elsewhere, and maybe you weren't alone. What if the signal didn't come from the stars? What if it came from within us? There's a theory, obscure, quietly unsettling, that alien contact is not about arrival, not about ships descending, or eyes watching from above. It's about activation, that the contact has already happened, and that the proof was buried inside us, deep in our cells, our minds, our very biology, long before we ever looked up. These are the biological beacons, not implants, not devices, but organic triggers, dormant pieces of code, sequences in DNA, clusters of neurons arranged like circuitry, waiting. The theory suggests that in some people, maybe all people, there exist latent structures designed to receive, transmit, or even broadcast when the right conditions are met, and that those conditions might be emotional, environmental, or cosmological. A frequency, a moment, a word, and suddenly, the signal begins. One case from 2009 involved a man who suffered a mild concussion in a car accident. After recovering, he began having vivid dreams, not of aliens or abductions, but of equations, numbers that filled pages, symbols he didn't understand, but that corresponded to known mathematical constants. When scanned, doctors found an unusual cluster of neural activity, not damaged, but changed. He said, "It feels like something sits inside me, but it sits not mine." Some researchers believe these beacons aren't technological at all, but evolutionary shortcuts, inserted long ago by unknown intelligences to guide development, a kind of genetic breadcrumb trail. Evidence? Consider the junk DNA mystery. Over 90% of human DNA was long considered non-coding, useless. But recent studies show patterns, rhythms, and even linguistic structure embedded in those regions. Some scientists have called it biological language. What if it's a message? A set of instructions? A waiting signal? Some believe contact doesn't need to come from out there, because it was planted in here. That humans are, quite literally, seeded with the capacity to remember something older than history. And some memories are only unlocked when you're ready. One woman in Brazil claimed to have had a near-death experience during surgery. When revived, she spoke a language no one recognized. Phoneticians said it shared features with no existing tongue, yet it had structure, repetition, and rhythm. She had never studied linguistics, and she spoke it for 6 days before it faded from her mind. She described it as a message sent through my blood. There are also reports of children who suddenly begin drawing symbols, precise, repeating, circular, that match glyphs found in ancient megalithic sites. When asked where they saw them, they simply reply, "I didn't I heard them." Then there are the dreams. People waking with sensations in their spine, buzzing in their skull, visions of something turning on, a warm light behind the eyes, a pulsing deep in the bones. Not pain. Recognition. Like a machine warming up. Some theorists believe that these beacons are buried physically, tiny organic nodes, placed near the pineal gland or the base of the spine, and when certain frequencies hit, from natural sources or artificial ones, they begin to resonate. You don't hear it. You become it. And if you ever felt a hum under your skin, a sudden sense that you have been summoned, or an unshakable knowing that something important is happening, and you can explain why, Then maybe you said already been activated. One classified project allegedly mapped human populations based on emergent cognitive spikes. It showed clusters of individuals who experienced simultaneous awakenings, creativity bursts, psychic dreams, spontaneous knowledge, all within the same 24-hour windows, across continents, with no common origin. Except one. The sky. The event always followed a celestial alignment, or a solar flare, or something not yet understood. So what are these beacons for? Some say they're homing devices, sending out coordinates when the species reaches a certain frequency. Others think they're tests, keys to higher cognition, unlocking only in those who've reached a certain evolutionary readiness. But the most poetic theory is this, that they are echoes of our creators. That whoever touched us long ago left behind their signature, not in stone, not in metal, but in flesh. And now, as we move closer to global awakening, as we stare deeper into the quantum, the cosmic, the unknown, the signal is slowly rising. You feel it. In dreams. In the hum behind your thoughts. In the way the stars sometimes seem aware, they never knock loudly. That SIP's the first thing most people say. No sirens, no alarms. Just a quiet presence on the porch, already waiting, already watching. Dressed in black. Faces smooth. Voices, wrong. Used to have heard the name before. Men in Black. But the movies turned them into punchlines. The real ones. They don't sit crack jokes. They erase memories. They appear after something happens. A sighting, a contact, a ripple in the silence. Always within hours. Always in pairs or trios. They ask calm, emotionless questions. And then they say something unforgettable. You didn't see that. And somehow, you believe them. The phenomenon dates back to the 1950s. One of the first known encounters involved Albert K. Bender, a UFO researcher, who claimed he was visited by 3 men in dark suits. They didn't threaten him, they simply took something. His desire to investigate further. He shut down his organization, and never spoke publicly again. He described them as human-shaped, but not human. Like actors wearing skin that didn't quite fit. Others report the same oddities. Unblinking eyes. Speech that stutters, then resets mid-sentence. Clothing that looks new but outdated, like costumes assembled by someone who read about humans but never met one. Cars that vanish. IDs that don't exist. They ask strange questions, not about events, but about feelings. Did you enjoy what you saw? Do you believe the light was meant for you? Will you speak to others who are not ready? Then they smile. And leave. And the witness, the experiencer, finds themselves changed. Not just shaken but fogged. Memories blur. Motivation fades. People who were outspoken go silent. Not because of fear, because of something else. Something like compliance. There are reports of men in black arriving before the event occurs, as if they know the moment you're going to see something before you do. Others claim the men don't always speak aloud, that they install thoughts, reroute perception, plant doubt. One woman in Utah said, "I knew what I saw, a craft, a being, clear as day. Then they came, and after, it felt like the memory wasn't mine anymore." They don't always come in person. Sometimes, it's a call, a voice that stutters with wrong inflection, asking about things you never said out loud. Sometimes it's a dream, a man at the edge of a corridor, watching, waiting, always in black. You wake up cold, disoriented, and then the photos are missing. The journal entries erased. The tape, blank. There's a theory, one of the darker ones, that men in black aren't government agents at all. That they sit projections, sent by something non-human, something that doesn't just want to hide, but to be forgotten. That they are the defense mechanism of a larger intelligence, a living firewall, not to kill you, just to overwrite you. In one military document, heavily redacted, there SIP's mention of behavioral nullification units, described as externalized anthropomorphic projections used for witness mitigation. Translation? Thought forms. Sentient echoes. Beings that can reprogram memory through interaction. And they sit for good at it. Even seasoned researchers have gone silent after encounters. One investigative journalist received a package containing only a mirror and a note. "Are you still sure it was your reflection?" He never published again. So why the theatrics? Because subtlety is powerful. Fear is a lever, but doubt is a switch. If you question what you saw, if you hesitate, they SIPF already won. Some believe Men in Black are the final layer of the silence protocol, not operatives, but manifestations of secrecy itself. They don't spit and need credentials. They have your uncertainty. So if you SIP ever seen something strange and felt like someone was watching you the next day, if you SIP ever started talking about a light in the sky and suddenly forgot what you were saying, if you SIP ever had a dream of someone knocking softly and waking up to silence, maybe they SIP already visited, and maybe you forgot, because that SIP's the point. They don't SIP take your life. They take your clarity. So sleep carefully tonight. You may wake with the memory of this story, or maybe just a feeling, and somewhere, a man in black, smiling. Some crashes leave debris, others leave only questions. There's one site, never confirmed, never denied, known in whispered circles as Crash Site Omega, not because it was the last, but because it was the one that changed everything and could never be spoken of again. Forget Roswell. Forget the retrieval stories from the 1940s and 50s. This one didn't happen in the desert. It happened in the forest. Thick, wet, hidden by layers of sound-dampening trees and cold mud that swallowed evidence whole. The year? Unknown. The location? Redacted. But the story leaks through, piece by piece. A surveillance satellite captured a high-velocity object veering off its orbital pattern and descending fast, not falling, but maneuvering. It didn't burn. It didn't break apart. It landed. Hard. Special recovery teams were dispatched, but not the usual kind. These weren't Air Force, not CIA. They wore no insignia. Their gear had no serials. When they reached the crash zone, they found nothing mechanical. No metal. No cockpit. No engines. Just a perfect crater, 20 feet wide, scorched but clean. At the center, something smooth, dark, pulsing, like a black stone heart. No seams, no entry points. And the closer they got, the slower they moved. One operative described it like wading through syrup. Another reported forgetting his own name for a full hour. Communications with the outside world were lost the moment the team approached. Not jammed, emptied, as if sound and signal were being absorbed. Radiation levels were normal. Magnetic readings? Impossible. Compasses spun. GPS shut down. Even the trees near the object grew in spiraled patterns, bent, twisted, as though they'd grown in reverse. And then came the dreams. Within 24 hours, all personnel began reporting vivid hallucinations, shared images, voices speaking in geometric phrases, numbers layered over memories. One man wrote a 37-page document entirely in a language no linguist could decode. He claimed he didn't write it. He translated it. The object remained still for 3 days. On the 4th, it vanished. No explosion. No trace. Just gone. All that remained was the crater, and the men who had seen it. None of them are publicly traceable. Some were said to have disappeared. Others institutionalized. One is rumored to live in complete silence in a remote monastery, never speaking a word. The event was classified under an internal label, Omega Black. Not even presidents have clearance. Why Omega? Because according to the only surviving memo, this is the final kind. Final? Not as in last. As in definitive. The type of contact that redefines everything. The memo mentioned 2 things. The object was not from space. The object was not made. It was grown. Living material that formed into craft shape for travel. Not biotech. Not wetware. Something beyond either. A vessel that was the pilot, the signal, and the purpose all at once. And it was meant to be found. Some theorists believe Crash Site Omega was a test. Not of our response, but of our resonance. A check-in. A pulse measurement. The object arrived, felt what we are, the fear, the awe, the resistance, and left. Why? Because we weren't set ready. Or because we were never meant to be. Others say it left behind something. Not in the crater, but in the minds of those who approached. A seed, a code. A timeline now unfolding through whispers and ideas that don't feel quite human. There's a growing belief that certain contact events don't leave evidence, because we are the evidence. That these crashes aren't accidents, they're installations. Moments meant to overwrite, destabilize, and reshape human consciousness. Like ripples in a pond that never stops trembling. So if you ever dreamed of a black stone pulsing in the forest, if you ever forgotten something important the moment you reached for it, if you ever felt like an idea arrived in your head fully formed, too strange to be yours, maybe Omega didn't disappear. Maybe it found you. Sleep deeply now. There are no crash sites tonight. Just quiet forests. And something pulsing just beneath the earth. Waiting. At first, they were dismissed as pranks. Elaborate, yes, but human. Flattened wheat stalks in neat swirling patterns appearing overnight in English fields during the late 1970s and 80s. But then they started to change. The circles became complex. Not just shapes, but messages. Intricate geometries, mathematical ratios, and symbols that mirrored constellations. Some were thousands of feet wide, crafted with impossible precision. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of tools. The phenomenon spread. From the rolling hills of Wiltshire to the plains of Canada, to fields in Japan, Brazil, and the American Midwest. Always the same silence. Always the same mystery. We call them crop circles. But maybe that name is too small for what they are. There's a theory that these formations aren't made for us at all, that they're communication beacons, messages encoded in visual frequency, patterns that aren't just meant to be seen but felt. When scientists analyzed some of the authentic circles, not the hoaxed ones, but the ones no one could explain, they found something strange. The wheat wasn't broken, but bent at 90-degree angles. The nodes of the plants showed signs of heating from inside, as if microwaves had caused them to soften and reform. Soil samples revealed magnetic anomalies. Tiny iron spheres fused to the dirt, as though the ground had been brushed by an intense energy field. Who could do that? And why? One theory points to sound. Not human sound, but high-frequency waves that sculpt the crop like sand-forming patterns under vibration. Experiments have shown that sound can create geometric shapes in matter, but these patterns go beyond simple resonance. They encode mathematical constants. Pi, the golden ratio, fractal equations, and even binary messages. In 2001, a formation appeared near Chilbolton Observatory in Hampshire, England. It wasn't just pretty, it was a reply. 27 years earlier, in 1974, astronomer Carl Sagan had sent the Arecibo message into space, a radio signal encoded with information about humanity, our DNA, our solar system, our technology. The Chilbolton crop formation resembled Sagan's message, but altered. It showed a different DNA structure, a different solar system, and a different sender. Coincidence? Too precise. Too deliberate. Skeptics argued that it was an elaborate hoax, but no one claimed responsibility. And no one explained how it appeared overnight, without a single broken stalk outside the formation. What if it wasn't a reply? What if it was a test? A way to measure our attention. To see if we're even capable of noticing, let alone understanding. Another formation, near Milk Hill in 2001, spanned over 900 feet and contained 409 circles arranged in a perfect spiral. It would have taken a human team days to complete, yet it appeared between sunset and sunrise. And then there are the personal effects. Some people who visited authentic formations describe a strange sensation. Headaches, dizziness, a feeling of being watched. Others claim that cameras malfunction, batteries drain, and compasses spin wildly. One researcher even reported hearing a low hum, like a faraway choir, while standing in the center of a fresh formation. He said it felt like the sound was inside his chest, not his ears. Could these symbols be more than messages? Could they be tools, devices for altering human consciousness? Ancient cultures believed symbols were alive, that sacred geometry could align the mind with cosmic order. Perhaps these formations aren't just art, but instructions. Some believe the patterns are meant for non-human observers, signals from an intelligence that moves not through language, but through shape and vibration, a universal alphabet of energy. And maybe, we're just overhearing a conversation not meant for us. There's also a darker theory, that these patterns are coordinates, markers, like landing beacons, preparing the ground for something to return. The farmers who find them are often annoyed. Lost crops, media frenzy. But sometimes, they say something strange. The field felt different that night. Like it was waiting. Maybe that SIP's all a crop circle is. A field that SIP's been touched. Rewritten. Reminded of something larger. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine walking through one. The flattened paths spiraling around you. The quiet hum in the soil. The sense that the pattern isn't on the ground. It's inside your head. What would you hear if you listened? Maybe not words. Maybe just the feeling that someone is still speaking to us. What if the invasion is planned? Not by extraterrestrials, but by us? Among the most chilling theories whispered in conspiracy circles and behind closed intelligence briefings is the notion of a false flag alien invasion, an event so grand, so terrifying, that it would unite the world under a single authority. Not because aliens arrived, but because someone wanted us to think they did. The idea isn't new. It first gained traction through Project Blue Beam, a speculative theory that emerged in the 1990s. According to proponents, the theory posits that governments, or some deeper, shadow authority, would stage a simulated extraterrestrial invasion using advanced holographic projection, unreleased aerospace technology, and electromagnetic manipulation to create the illusion of hostile contact. But why? Because nothing unifies a fractured population like an external threat. We've seen this before, on smaller scales. Manufactured enemies. Controlled panic. Emergency powers granted in the name of protection. Now imagine that same strategy, applied to the entire planet. Imagine waking up one morning to footage from major cities around the world, glowing discs over Shanghai, beams of light over Los Angeles, triangular shadows over Berlin. Reports flood, in power grids failing, strange signals on radio frequencies, governments going dark. Then a broadcast, clean, authoritative, global. This is a coordinated extraterrestrial attack. All nations must respond as one. And just like that, borders dissolve. Martial law is accepted. Surveillance is normalized. Resistance is framed as treason to humanity itself. It's not that hard to imagine, is it? After all, most people wouldn't demand proof. They'd demand safety. Former US President Ronald Reagan once mused aloud at the UN. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. Was it just a thought? Or a hint? Some insiders claim that test runs have already happened. Unexplained mass drone sightings over US nuclear facilities. High-altitude balloons, tracked and shot down with no public explanation. Lights in the sky during military exercises, seen, logged, and erased. All designed to measure reaction time, media response, public anxiety. The technology exists, or so it seems rumored. Projects like HARP, which manipulate the ionosphere. Aircraft cloaking technologies. Directed energy weapons that can mimic atmospheric phenomena. And space-based projection systems that could create three-dimensional illusions visible across hundreds of miles. All this, not to attack, but to simulate. A spectacle designed to be undeniable. Some theorists argue that the goal isn't global dominance, but global obedience, that a united world government, long dreamed of in certain think tanks, requires an event so unthinkable, so universal, that resistance becomes unpatriotic. A staged alien invasion wouldn't just change politics. It would rewrite belief. New religions would form. Old ones would collapse. Science would fracture, some demanding analysis, others demanding silence. And beneath it all, a small group would hold the keys. The ones who pulled the curtain. The ones who know it was all a lie. But here sits the twist. What if the invasion begins as a simulation, and something real answers the call? What if the false flag turns into a beacon? Because if there are intelligences out there, and they see us broadcasting fear, aggression, desperation, what kind of contact will that invite? There's also a quieter theory, that the invasion has already happened. That the false flag narrative is insurance, a way to explain sudden appearances when cover stories fail. So if you ever see ships in the sky, if the news flickers and tells you to stay calm, if world leaders stand shoulder to shoulder and tell you we are under attack, pause. Look past the screen. Past the fear. Ask not what SIP's coming. Ask who benefits. Then listen. Not for the sound of engines, but for the silence that follows. The kind of silence you only hear when everyone sits looking in the same direction, and no one is watching the people behind them. It was supposed to be just smoke. But then, the flames spoke, whispers rising in the crackle, words forming in the heat. A language not made by mouths, but by movement, by rhythm, by burning. This is the theory of voices in fire. The unsettling claim that alien communication may sometimes come through natural elements, and that fire in particular has been a medium of contact for millennia. Ancient cultures knew this. The Oracle of Delphi inhaled fumes from the earth and delivered messages in ecstatic flames. Shamans around the world stared into fire to see visions, hear spirits, speak truths no one else could. But what if they weren't set hallucinating? What if fire has always been a conduit? In the 1970s, a classified psychological study referred to as Project Ember, later discredited, some say buried, recorded subjects placed in sensory isolation chambers with a single flickering flame. After 20 minutes, most reported hearing structured whispers, not internal monologues, but external voices, languages unknown, repetitions, phrases they could not forget. We were never gone. You built us into heat. Fire listens back. No recordings captured the sounds. Only the subjects heard them. That sips the pattern. Experiencers claim that the voices emerge when the listener surrenders, not by trying to hear, but by allowing, when focus fades, and the flame becomes not a light, but a pulse. Some report entire conversations happening through the rhythm of crackling logs. High-pitched pops correspond to yes. Low thuds, to no. Silence as a divider. The voice in fire isn't set human. It's depths-coded heat, and the messages, often prophetic, personal, but strangely unified across cultures. You are not alone. They wait below. Return to ash. The watchers burn quietly. One chilling report from a forest firefighter in Arizona tells of a blaze that refused to behave, dancing against the wind, curving around equipment, igniting only specific tree lines. In the middle of the firestorm, he claims to have heard a name, his name, spoken in a tone that felt like it was always behind him. When he turned around, the fire changed direction. Coincidence? Maybe. But he quit the next day. This theory also intersects with UFO sightings, particularly those reported during or after wildfires, volcanic eruptions, or ritual burnings. Lights seen emerging from the smoke, shapes in the ash, glowing symbols dancing in the flames. What if fire, in its unpredictable brilliance, allows interdimensional beings to transmit signals? Not just thermally, but informationally. Scientists have noted that plasma, a component of fire, can carry and emit electromagnetic data under specific conditions. And some experimental physicists believe fire behaves oddly around consciousness, flickering differently based on observation, reacting to emotional stimuli, mirroring the intent of the watcher. Which raises an eerie question. What if fire is not just a chemical reaction, but a sensory medium for the unseen? A kind of living veil, through which something on the other side reaches out, not with hands, not with words, but with warmth, flicker, and encoded destruction. Why do we stare into it? Why do we tell stories around it? Why does it comfort and frighten in the same breath? Because maybe something stares back. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you're alone beside the fire, and the wood hisses without cause, and a voice forms not in your ears but behind your eyes. Don't stect, ignore it. Because that voice might not be imagined. It might be a memory you never made. Returning at last, in flames, there sips a place beneath your feet. Not just rock, not just magma, but a vast, forbidden space. They say it sips a myth, a metaphor, a fantasy for those afraid of the sky. But some insist the sky was never where they came from. This is the theory of the hollow earth gates, the belief that contact with alien life hasn't come from above, but from within. Buried in ancient maps, oral traditions, and unmarked military reports, this idea suggests that our planet is not a sealed sphere, but one riddled with vast chambers, caverns, and engineered gates that lead to an inner world and its inhabitants. From the Hopi legends of the Ant People, to Tibetan texts speaking of Shambhala, to 19th century naval maps that hint at polar openings, the theme repeats: a world within. guarded by thresholds, known only to the few who dared to listen. And those who returned from it? They never speak of little green men. They speak of tall, glowing beings, of perfect silence, of light that bends the wrong way. The US government has repeatedly denied any access to supposed subterranean facilities in the Arctic and Antarctic. Yet satellite images frequently show mysterious blacked-out regions, unexplainable magnetic anomalies, and sudden GPS blackouts near those zones. Theories began circulating in the mid-20th century, especially after Admiral Richard E. Byrd's Antarctic expeditions. Though his official reports detail routine exploration, his personal journal, whose authenticity is debated, mentions a flight into an opening in the Earth's crust, and an encounter with a race of beings who warned humanity against nuclear war. They allowed me to enter, but not to stay. What if that journal wasn't sipped fiction? Many ancient structures seem aligned not to the heavens, but to deep geological points. The Giza Plateau, Mount Shasta, the Amazon Basin, all sites of strange electromagnetic behavior, all associated with myths of underground entrances. And then there are the sounds. Low-frequency rumbles known as the hum, reported around the world, often dismissed as industrial noise, yet heard even in remote wilderness. Some describe them as mechanical growls, others as chant-like pulses. Audio engineers analyzing field recordings have noted patterns too structured to be natural. Pulses within pulses. Information hidden in resonance. The implication? Something down there is broadcasting. Or worse, waiting. If the Earth does contain networks of tunnels or hollow regions, could they be natural or constructed? Some believe the beings within are not extraterrestrial at all, but ultraterrestrial, native to Earth before us, evolved in isolation, or survivors of past civilizations that went underground after cataclysmic events. But why remain hidden? Perhaps they aren't set. Perhaps they've always controlled the gates, not to keep themselves in, but to keep us out. Whistleblowers from military excavation projects have reported sudden collapses, vanishing personnel, and unexplained devices uncovered miles beneath the surface. One claimed they drilled into a chamber that reverberated like lungs. Another mentioned symbols carved into obsidian walls, not human, not machine, but somewhere between. If any of this is real, then alien contact may not come from the stars, but from the oldest parts of our planet, carved before time, sealed before memory. The hollow Earth gates may not just be physical. Some theorists suggest they respond to frequency, that only under certain magnetic conditions or sound vibrations do they activate. Imagine a door locked not by key, but by thought, by resonance, by planetary mood. And when opened, not chaos, but correction. As if those below have waited long enough, watching the surface collapse under its own ignorance, and preparing to return. So next time the ground rumbles in a pattern, next time a mountain hums without wind, next time a cave echoes when it shouldn't sit, you might not be alone. You might be near a gate, and the ones inside might already know. You found it. They set not fiction, not metaphor, not shadows in the myths of ancient cultures. They walk, they rule, and according to some, they made a deal. This is the theory of the Reptilian Accord, a forbidden pact said to exist between a reptilian extraterrestrial species and human governments, forged in secrecy, upheld in silence, and enforced with fear. To believe this theory is to accept that power doesn't reside where you think it does. It didn't begin in a war room or a palace. It began beneath them, in a sealed chamber, decades ago, with words that were never written down. The first whispers emerged in the late 20th century, a fusion of conspiracy, mythology, and personal testimony. Some said they ruled from the shadows. Others said they were the shadows. But the key detail that separates this theory from others is cooperation, not conquest, not invasion, but agreement. According to the most persistent accounts, the reptilian species, ancient, cold-blooded, hyper-intelligent, offered technology in exchange for silence. They would help us advance in medicine, in spaceflight, in artificial intelligence. But in return, they asked for two things: undisturbed access to certain regions of Earth, primarily underground, deep-sea trenches, and specific energy zones. Permission to interact with select humans, for observation, experimentation, or hybridization. And the governments agreed. Not all of them. Just the ones that mattered at the time. Some theorists trace the deal back to the 1950s, tied to secret treaties like the alleged Greada Treaty, supposedly signed between the US government and non-human entities. Most versions refer to the Greys, but a lesser-known variation focuses on reptilian species, more manipulative, more hierarchical, more invested in control rather than cooperation. The theory claims that while other species observed, the reptilians embedded, disguised, adapted, placed themselves in positions of influence, not by conquest, but by invitation. Why would humans agree? Because we were afraid. After early contact incidents, Roswell, Kecksburg, Shag Harbor, some military factions believed Earth was already being watched or infiltrated. Rather than resist, they sought to bargain. The reptilians, in turn, gave us advancements we didn't understand. Materials that defied physics. Genetic data that healed without surgery. Guidance on manipulating thought, attention, even memory. But it came with a price. Some claim that hidden facilities beneath major cities still house representatives of the Accord, not in cages but in seats. Seats of observation, not governance. They don't sit to command our leaders. They advise them. They don't invade our dreams. They study them. And those who try to reveal this? Discredited. Mocked. Erased. Whistleblowers have emerged, former military intelligence officers, black ops personnel, even scientists, all claiming to have seen non-human advisors working within secured underground bases. Not grey. Not hybrid. Reptilian. Descriptions align strangely well. Tall, 7 to 9 feet. Slitted yellow or green eyes. Scaled skin with chameleon-like adaptability. Low, growling vocal patterns that don't require lips. A presence described as predatory, but precise. And yet they speak. In English. In symbols. In direct thought. The Accord allegedly limits their population above ground, restricts certain experiments, and keeps human oversight involved. But oversight only works if humans are still in charge. And according to some, that ended long ago. The most terrifying version of this theory suggests the Accord wasn't just about diplomacy, but exchange. That some of our leaders were offered longevity, protection, wealth, in return for obedience. And those who refused, they were replaced. Not by body doubles. By simulated masks, cloned identities, or full hybrid proxies. Some say the coldness you see in certain public figures isn't spurred personality. It's steps programming. So the next time you see a leader who doesn't blink, or one who smiles with no warmth behind the eyes, or speaks like they are reading a script written in another tongue, you might be seeing a clause of the Accord in action. Because if this theory is true, then it sips not about aliens hiding in ships. It steps about alliances hidden in bloodlines. And the ones who shake our hands might be the very ones who slit our species' throat. Politely. They didn't disappear. They just changed the station. This is the theory of the frequency that shifts. A disturbing idea that alien contact doesn't occur in visible form or audible messages, but in vibrational realities, and that their presence is constant, only tuned out by our perception. The premise is simple, yet terrifying. Aliens are here. Always have been. We just don't hear them, not because they're hiding, but because they exist on a frequency we're not attuned to. And the real horror? That frequency might be just a thought away. Imagine reality not as a solid object, but as a radio band. You live at 98.7 FM, the human experience. But tune slightly higher, 98.8, 98.9, and you might enter realms where they operate. Not above us. Not beneath us. Beside us, vibrating faster, denser, subtler. Several ancient traditions already spoke in this language. Hindus described lokas, layers of existence occupying the same space, vibrating at different levels. Shamans speak of traveling between realms not with movement, but with drumming, chanting, trance, changing their internal frequency. Modern science, too, hints at something strange. We perceive only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear within limited decibels. We sense a fraction of vibration. What if our reality is just a filter? What if contact isn't rare, just masked? Those who have accidentally shifted describe symptoms eerily similar. A sudden pressure in the ears, as if descending in a plane. Blurred edges of objects. Static, both audible and visual. A deep silence, so total it feels loud. And then presence. Not vision, not form, but an awareness pressing against them, ancient and deliberate. They don't sit always speak. They don't sit always reveal. But when they do, the message is often the same. You stir, out of sync. The veil hums. All you had to do was listen. Some theorists suggest alien craft aren't moving through space. They're phasing through frequency. That's why UFOs seem to jump, vanish, reappear, not teleportation, tuning. In fact, several declassified radar reports describe objects that appear only on certain scan bands, invisible to pilots, invisible to cameras, but visible to cameras, but visible to radar tuned just slightly off normal. Why? Because these objects don't belong to our standard vibration. And if we could match it, some say humans have, unintentionally, through sound, through psychedelics, through electromagnetic fields near certain geological formations. One chilling account describes a group of researchers experimenting with sustained binaural beats and EM stimulation. At a specific setting, several participants claimed to see shimmering figures in the corner of the room, not fully formed but there, watching. The room went cold. One person fainted. The data was lost. The project was shut down. Coincidence? Or did they briefly land on the frequency where observation becomes mutual? The military may already know. Rumors of frequency-based weapons and perception-altering tech date back to Cold War black projects. One document refers cryptically to resonant dissociation fields, the supposed ability to shift a target's awareness into unseeable dimensions and leave them there. But this isn't set science fiction. It's happening in living rooms, forests, backyards, to ordinary people. People who wake up at 3:33 a.m. and feel watched. People who hear voices not in their head, but in the space around them. People who walk through a quiet field and suddenly feel like they've been tuned wrong. You Steve felt it, haven't set you? That odd moment, when the world goes still, when sound drops, when your skin tingles, and something vibrates just beyond comprehension. That sip's not imagination. That sip's not madness. That might be a brush with the frequency they live on. They don't need ships. They don't just need light. They just need you to blink at the right time, to think the wrong thought, to resonate by accident. Because once you do, they don't start to come to you. You come to them. Every so often, a satellite glitches, a camera blurs, a signal cuts out, and when it returns, something sips missing. Or worse, something new is there. This is the theory of the anomaly in orbit. The claim that Earth has long shared its orbital space with non-human technology, an artificial object that predates human spaceflight, evades detection, and observes our planet with impossible precision. Sometimes it's called the Black Knight satellite, other times, simply the Watcher. But its defining trait is consistency. It always returns, always hovers just outside our control, always slips through every net we throw. Let's begin with the earliest reports. In 1954, 3 years before the launch of Sputnik, the St. Louis Dispatch published a claim by aviation engineer Donald Kehoe that the U.S. Air Force had detected 2 unknown satellites orbiting Earth. Impossible at the time. No country had launched any. Nothing should been there. Skeptics called it nonsense. But 6 years later, in 1960, the U.S. Navy officially tracked an object in polar orbit, a path no Earth satellite had yet taken. It was moving irregularly, emitted no known signal, and disappeared without impact. Then came the photos. In 1998, during the STS-88 mission, the first space shuttle trip to the International Space Station, NASA astronauts captured a series of images of what they described as space debris. But the images, they didn't look like debris. The object was black, angular, and eerily symmetrical. Some frames showed it changing orientation mid-flight. Others showed it absorbing light differently than its surroundings. The images were uploaded, then quietly dismissed. To this day, they remain publicly available, though buried. To believers, those photos show the anomaly, Still watching, still orbiting, and still beyond our understanding. But what is it? Here's where the theories diverge. Some say it's alien technology, placed here millennia ago to monitor Earth's development, much like scientists tagging animals for observation. Others say it's a beacon, broadcasting our status to a wider galactic network, updating a file on whether we've yet become interesting. A more disturbing theory suggests it's ours, not human, but from a previous civilization lost to time, which achieved spaceflight and placed the anomaly in orbit as a final act before extinction. Or perhaps it sips all three. Whatever its origin, the anomaly isn't sit static. Ham radio operators across the globe have reported strange signals originating from beyond standard satellite paths, bursts of data in no known language, sometimes mimicking Earth's own radio stations in distorted echoes. One chilling case in 1975 involved a signal that played back a scrambled version of a live weather report before it was broadcast, a 30-second echo from the future. Military contractors monitoring orbital space have quietly admitted to unclassified objects that maneuver without propulsion, often in close sync with classified satellites, almost as if mirroring them. One defense report describes an object that approached a spy satellite, matched its trajectory, and remained perfectly still beside it for 3 days. Then it vanished. No engine flares. No re-entry signatures. No debris. Just gone. And sometimes, very rarely, it sends light. Astronomers have observed unexplained flashes near the anomaly's presumed path, too short to be flares, too irregular to be natural. Some believe these flashes aren't SERPO signals to us, but responses to something else. What if we're not the only planet being monitored? What if these anomalies, orbiting unseen, are part of a network? Each planet with life. Each anomaly assigned. Each one watching. But here sits the real question. If it sits just observing, why does it move when we notice it? Many sightings report the same sequence. Detection. Signal loss. Temporary reappearance. Sudden course change. It doesn't want to be seen. But not because it sits afraid. Because it knows we sit not ready. And when we finally are, it won't sit land. It won't speak. It still simply stop pretending to be debris. And we still realize it was never orbiting us. We were orbiting it. You still always had it. Locked inside you. Waiting. This is the theory of the DNA activation myth. The idea that human beings were genetically engineered by extraterrestrials, not just as an experiment, but as a seeded species, and that buried within our DNA lies a dormant code meant to awaken under specific conditions. According to this myth, we are not complete. Not yet. Not until they, or something, triggers what was left sleeping inside our genes. Let's begin with the numbers. The human genome contains 3.2 billion base pairs. Of that, only around 1.5% codes for actual proteins, the biological machinery of life. The rest? Labeled non-coding, or worse, junk DNA. But is it really junk? Some scientists believe this so-called genetic noise has regulatory functions. Others, more mystically inclined, suggest something deeper. That this unused code is a message. A buried script. Not random, but deliberate. And the theory goes further. It claims that ancient alien visitors, sometimes called the architects, manipulated early human ancestors, embedding multi-layered information into our DNA. This wasn't SIPT biological programming. It was informational encryption. A kind of spiritual software. And just like software, it waits for a signal. A frequency. A burst of cosmic radiation. Or even a shift in planetary alignment. Whatever the mechanism, the idea is clear. One day the code will activate. What happens next depends on who you ask. Some say the result will be a mass psychic awakening. Humans suddenly able to perceive other dimensions, communicate telepathically, or even access collective ancestral memory. Others speak of physiological changes, increased brain capacity, enhanced immune systems, reversal of aging. Then there are the more esoteric claims that activated humans will no longer be bound by time or matter, that will become trans-dimensional beings, bridging the gap between flesh and frequency. But why would aliens do this? Some believe Earth is part of a galactic project, a kind of cosmic garden where multiple species planted life and watched it grow. Humanity in this view is not a mistake. but a hybrid, built from Earth-based primates and otherworldly DNA. The activation code, then, is a key, unlocking our true heritage. Evidence? Its steps always anecdotal, but persistent. People who experience sudden surges of intuition, near-death experiences where they remember a different identity, dreams filled with complex symbols they've never seen, but later match ancient glyphs. One case involved a woman who, after being struck by lightning, began speaking in a language no one could identify. Years later, a linguist matched the syntax to a speculative reconstruction of Proto-Sumerian, a language lost for over 6,000 years. Coincidence? Or partial activation? Others point to the strange rise in global synchronicities, mass sightings of repeating numbers, sudden intuitive leaps in technology, and an increased fascination with DNA itself in spiritual communities. It's as if something is calling attention to our own code. Some New Age theorists go even further. They say the activation is already happening. That solar flares, electromagnetic anomalies, and planetary alignments are subtly stimulating certain individuals, those with the right genetic markers, pushing them toward new awareness. Of course, mainstream science scoffs at this. DNA doesn't wake up. They say, there sits no hidden instruction set. No galactic message waiting to be decoded. But even they admit, we don't know what 98% of our genome does. And when you remember that some of the earliest mythologies, from the Book of Enoch to the Sumerian tablets, speak of sky gods who created mankind, and forbade certain knowledge, the parallels become harder to ignore. What if the forbidden fruit wasn't set knowledge? What if it was self-recognition? A realization that we were never just human, but a delayed message written in flesh. And when that message finally reads itself, the myth ends. Or maybe it begins. They didn't just watch. They intervened. Again, and again, and again. This is the theory of the hybrid program, the chilling belief that extraterrestrials have been systematically abducting humans, extracting genetic material, and creating a new form of life, part human, part alien, but entirely unlike either. Unlike other contact theories, this one isn't subtle. It doesn't involve frequencies or vibrations. It involves wombs, labs, and engineered minds. At its core, the hybrid program is a breeding project, but not for reproduction. For integration. Let's begin with the abductees. Since the 1960s, thousands of people across the world have described eerily similar experiences. Sudden paralysis in bed, bright lights flooding through walls, floating sensations, cold, clinical environments, figures with oversized heads, large black eyes, and emotionless demeanor. And most disturbingly, medical procedures focused on the reproductive organs. Women report being told they're pregnant, then later, that the pregnancy is gone. Men report extraction of fluids. Some speak of seeing strange children, familiar yet foreign, who look at them with recognition. These are not isolated delusions. They occur across cultures, languages, belief systems, and the details often match before the subjects ever meet each other or read about others' cases. So what are these hybrids? Some say they are a new species, created to bridge the biological gap between humans and a non-terrestrial species that cannot survive Earth's environment unaided. Others believe they are transitional bodies, meant to ease humanity into direct alien contact by offering a familiar face. But the most disturbing possibility? That the hybrids are not here to help us. They spur here to replace us. According to some abductees, the hybrids are being raised, somewhere, in controlled environments. They are intelligent, emotionally muted, telepathic, and utterly obedient to their alien creators. Some claim to have seen vast nurseries of these beings. Others say they've been shown visions of future Earths where hybrids walk among us, unnoticed, indistinguishable, except for a feeling, a hollowness. One woman claimed she was taken to a white domed facility on the moon, where she was introduced to her son. He was taller than her, had large eyes, soft voice. He asked her if she was proud of him. Then he vanished. She was left with one thought. They sit not invading, they sit growing here. Some abductees report being trained, taught how to interact with hybrid children, how to teach them emotion, how to hold them properly. But why would aliens care about empathy? Unless the hybrids aren't set just for observation. They SERP meant to live among us, to inherit Earth after a silent transition. This may explain the growing fascination with human behavior observed in abduction cases, how we love, how we bond, how we grieve. Hybrids, it seems, lack these traits. And their creators, the Greys, according to most reports, may be trying to reverse engineer emotion. Not just DNA, souls. Now consider this. What if the hybrids aren't future invaders, but future ambassadors? Messengers between species. Carriers of both worlds. Translators of alien will into human form. There are whispers in the UFO community of certain political or business figures who seem eerily distant. Always calm. Always detached. Perfectly efficient. Some think they sit part of the program, or at least, replacements. Even more troubling are the children born with unexplainable conditions, sudden savant-level abilities, unplaceable blood types, or sensory skills far beyond what science understands. Are these children errors in the hybrid program? Or early releases? You've seen them. Quiet. Different. Watching the world like it sips. A simulation. The hybrid program doesn't need public acceptance. It doesn't need permission. It only needs time. A few generations. A few adjustments. A few disappearances, explained away as accidents or delusions. Until one day, you walk into a room, and everyone in it feels just slightly off. Not every secret lies in shadows. Some are hidden in light, bent, refracted, weaponized. This is the theory of reverse-engineered light, the claim that after retrieving alien technology, certain Earth-based programs discovered that the most advanced components weren't made of metal, but of manipulated light itself. In this theory, extraterrestrials don't build with matter, they shape photons. And in doing so, they bypass every limitation we know: mass, inertia, resistance, gravity. What we consider the fastest thing in the universe, they treat as raw material. Let's rewind. In several alleged crash retrieval stories from Roswell in 1947 to the lesser-known case in the Kalahari Desert in 1989, military witnesses describe objects that glowed without heat, not glowing as in on fire or electric, but a kind of contained radiance, like light sculpted into form. Touching it didn't burn. It wasn't set solid, but it had edges. Technicians reported seeing panels that shifted color with thought, materials that responded to observation, even walls that turned transparent, but only in specific angles, like the light was being redirected around consciousness itself. What if this wasn't set to just advanced cloaking? What if the craft themselves are formed from photonic frameworks, shaped by controlling light's path, coherence, and interaction with quantum fields? Now imagine trying to reverse engineer that. You're handed a material that isn't really there, not in the traditional sense. It weighs nothing, but it holds shape. You cut it, it heals. You block it, it bends. You shine a laser at it, and it splits the beam into information. According to leaked whistleblower testimony from aerospace contractors, the biggest breakthroughs didn't come from metallurgy, but optics labs. One program, supposedly housed in Nevada, focused entirely on coherent field dynamics, how structured light could create gravitational distortions, time anomalies, and even localized inertial shifts. In simpler terms, a flashlight that changes gravity, a beam that doesn't just illuminate, it rearranges reality. Some believe this research led to breakthroughs in non-lethal weapons, crowd dispersal tech, active camouflage, and even targeted light pulses that can cause confusion, nausea, or temporary memory loss. But that sips just the fringe. Others whisper of deeper, darker possibilities. That reverse-engineered light allowed for holograms you can feel, rooms bigger on the inside than the outside, vehicles that fold space, not fly through it, and perhaps most chillingly, devices that use structured light to interface with the brain, not in the way we think of VR or implants, but by literally sculpting the way your neurons fire. You see light, you believe it. But the light was never meant for your eyes. It was meant for your mind. Some suggest these devices were tested in small towns, at night, where people woke up with odd dreams, saw things in the sky that couldn't be real, or couldn't forget, even when everyone else did. What if those weren't dreams? What if someone was testing how much of your perception could be rewritten with nothing but light? There sits also an esoteric layer to this theory. Ancient texts, especially from Gnostic and Eastern traditions, describe beings of light who descend not in fire but in shimmer, who teach by showing visions, who disappear at dawn. Were they real, or were they projected? If the ancients were visited, did they see the beings themselves, or the light architecture meant to deliver a message? And are we now trying to do the same? Some believe reverse engineering alien light isn't set about technology. It's set about control of belief. Create a craft from light, and you make a vehicle. Create a god from light, and you control a people. In the wrong hands, this isn't a scientific breakthrough. It sits religious engineering, the ultimate psyop. After all, if you can manipulate photons, you control what people see, what they remember, what they worship. In the end, reverse-engineered light might be more dangerous than any weapon, because it doesn't need to destroy you. It just needs to reprogram your reality. What if the truth was documented? What if someone actually wrote it all down? Locations, species, experiments, craft, every secret about alien contact. And then, it disappeared. No trail, no backup, no whistleblower leak. Just evaporation. This is the theory of the files that evaporated. The belief that not only do alien contact documents exist, but that they've been systematically erased from all record, not redacted, not hidden in vaults. Unmade. Let's go back to 1989. A British hacker named Gary McKinnon accessed several US military and NASA databases looking for evidence of UFOs. What he found, before being caught, was deeply unsettling. A list of non-terrestrial officers. Ship-to-ship transfer logs not associated with any known Earth-based fleet. References to something called Solar Warden. And then, nothing. The servers were wiped. The files gone. Not protected by passwords but scrubbed completely. And McKinnon wasn't set alone. Over the decades, researchers and insiders have described a bizarre pattern. They request a document through FOIA Freedom of Information Act. They know it exists. It's been cited, referenced, even catalogued. But when the agency responds, the file is either no longer available or cannot be located. Even paper copies, once held in archive, have vanished. A folder that was once there isn't set. A record that was once referenced no longer exists. As if the past itself has been edited. Now consider this. In the 1970s, multiple researchers began investigating Project Aquarius, a supposedly top-secret program focused on extraterrestrial life. One researcher, who claimed to have seen internal briefings, tried to file a public lawsuit for the release of documents. 3 weeks later, their home office was mysteriously burned. No arson suspect. No fire source identified. Only the room containing the files had burned. Everything else untouched. Coincidence? Or containment? Then there are the stories from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, long rumored to house retrieved alien tech. In the 1990s, a civilian contractor claimed to have discovered a hidden sub-basement archive while surveying air duct designs. He described shelves of sealed containers, some marked with dates as far back as the 1940s, and symbols he didn't recognize. When he returned 2 days later, with permission to photograph, the room no longer existed. It wasn't sealed. It had been structurally removed. Walls replaced. Blueprints altered. As if the building itself had been rearranged to forget. Then there sits the digital angle. Some ex-Intel agents claim the development of data-breathing AI systems, software that constantly scans all networks and databases for classified alien references, and then initiates auto-deletion protocols before the information can even be printed or shared. It SIPs not censorship. It SIPs preemption, like erasing a sentence before its SIPs ever typed. And if that sounds paranoid, consider this. Why have entire archives gone missing from the CIA's MK-Ultra programs? Why did entire years of NORAD data vanish from Cold War logs? Why did the National Archives admit in 2017 that thousands of Vietnam War-era files were accidentally destroyed? What if alien contact evidence was buried inside those unrelated files? Now imagine a deeper layer. What if certain pieces of truth are encoded into reality itself? Patterns in nature, consciousness, or quantum behavior, and someone found the blueprint, then removed it from public physics? What if the standard model of science is missing a piece not because we failed to find it, but because someone made sure we couldn't set? In this theory, truth doesn't just disappear. It's selectively erased from minds, systems, and sometimes history itself. There sits even a disturbing side note. A few researchers who tried to reconstruct evaporated files through witness accounts or analog backups later developed sudden symptoms of amnesia, aphasia, or cognitive fog. One neurologist compared their brain scans and found a consistent gap in activity, a region normally associated with memory consolidation, silent, as if the brain, like the file, had been scrubbed. What kind of force can do that? Not a government, not a hacker, but something else. Something that understands reality at the level of memory, matter, and meaning. Something that doesn't just want to hide the truth. It wants to erase the possibility of it ever existing. There are messages we read with our eyes. Others, we feel in our bones. And some seem to bypass thought entirely. This is the theory of contact through art, the belief that alien communication isn't always technological or physical, but symbolic, subconscious, and aesthetic. Instead of landing in ships or sending radio signals, what if extraterrestrials speak in visuals, patterns, or creative impulses? What if art itself is a transmission medium? Across cultures and centuries, countless artists have described moments of sudden inspiration, visions they couldn't explain, symbols they didn't understand, colors they had never seen. These moments often strike without warning, as if an idea was inserted into their consciousness fully formed. The painter who dreamed of a landscape before ever visiting it. The sculptor who carved beings with elongated skulls and luminous eyes, long before the first alien sketch. The composer who swears the melody wasn't his. This isn't just creativity. This is reception. Some theorists point to the Nazca lines in Peru, vast geoglyphs only visible from the air, as an early example. Their purpose, unknown, but their designs mirror certain symbols that have appeared in crop circles and even spacecraft blueprints released in UFO-related leaks. Then, there sits Leonardo da Vinci. His notebooks are filled with anatomical diagrams, technological sketches, and strange hybrid creatures. One page even shows a humanoid machine, powered by gears and light refraction, eerily close to modern ideas of synthetic intelligence. Was Da Vinci just ahead of his time? Or was he guided? Some believe alien beings don't visit us in form, but in thought, subtly influencing the direction of human culture by planting seeds in the minds of its most creative interpreters. This could explain why so many sci-fi writers of the 20th century predicted technologies that only emerged decades later. Arthur C. Clarke with satellites, Philip K. Dick with virtual realities, Gene Roddenberry with communicators and AI ethics. Were they guessing? Or channeling? Now enter the idea of subconscious contact, art as encoding. What if recurring patterns, spirals, eyes, pyramids, luminous beings, aren't just symbols but markers? What if, without knowing it, artists are embedding alien data structures into their work? One theory suggests that art containing certain geometries can trigger latent awareness in viewers, a kind of neural resonance. When you look at it, something activates. Not knowledge, but familiarity. Like you've seen it before, in a dream, or a life not lived on Earth. There are even stories of paintings that caused hallucinations, sculptures that people claimed spoke to them, or songs that brought on uncontrollable emotion for no known reason. Coincidence? Or contact? The CIA has investigated this. In declassified MK-Ultra documents, researchers explored how abstract images and sounds affected cognition and emotion, testing whether perception alone could modify belief or behavior. In one experiment, participants viewed symmetrical black and white patterns while under mild hypnosis. Some reported seeing faces behind the image. Others described a presence. A few became physically ill, but no two saw the same thing. As if the art wasn't static, but interactive. Some artists have even claimed they didn't make their work. They discovered it. They dreamt it. They felt it. They were just the vessel. And then there's the question of modern digital art. Some believe that artificial intelligence, fed millions of images, has begun to regenerate alien symbols from forgotten civilizations, deep consciousness, or even non-human intent. Certain AI-generated pieces look disturbingly familiar, not to us, but to abductees, beings, rooms, devices, drawn by machines, yet remembered by people who have never seen the images before. The implications are vast. If art is a medium of alien contact, then every gallery could be a transmission hub. Every sketchbook, a satellite dish. Every dream, a download. It means you don't need to believe in aliens. You just need to look long enough. Because eventually, something will look back. They trained for space. They traveled beyond Earth. They looked down at our planet, and up at the unknown. But some of them came back with secrets. This is the theory of the Astronaut Code, the belief that those who've left Earth's atmosphere and ventured into orbit, the moon, or beyond, have witnessed evidence of alien life, and have been silently sworn to secrecy by international agreement. Not just to protect missions, but to protect reality. Let's begin with Apollo 11. During the first moon landing in 1969, a portion of the communication between Neil Armstrong and Mission Control was, allegedly, cut from the public feed. According to leaked transcripts and insider claims, Armstrong radioed back something chilling. NASA, of course, denies any such transmission ever occurred, but numerous insiders, including high-ranking military personnel and audio engineers, claim the missing minutes were real and intentionally censored. He supposedly described craft parked on the edge of a crater, observing, "They sipper here. They sipper watching us." And that sip's only the beginning. Buzz Aldrin, another Apollo astronaut, has openly stated that he witnessed a light following their module, one that could not be explained by space debris or reflections. His account is cautious, carefully worded. He never says alien, but he never denies it either. Unless he knew. Then there's Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man on the moon, who after retiring claimed with absolute certainty that aliens exist, and that governments know it. Why would a decorated astronaut say such a thing, unless he truly believed? Mitchell spoke often of the code of silence that exists in both NASA and the military, a cultural and legal expectation to never disclose anything that would disrupt public order, national security, or scientific credibility. And it wasn't set just Americans. Russian cosmonauts have also reported strange encounters. Cosmonaut Viktor Afanasiev claimed that during a mission in 1979, he was followed by an unidentified object that performed maneuvers far beyond human technology. Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, once said that the cosmos had a voice, a presence he couldn't explain. His reports were immediately classified. The footage? Never released. The theory goes deeper. Some believe that part of astronaut training, especially in elite programs, includes not just physical and psychological endurance, but ideological conditioning. In other words, preparing the mind to witness something that can't be explained, and still remain silent. What exactly constitutes an unknown anomaly? And why include that clause at all? One leak even suggests there SERP's a non-disclosure clause in international space treaties, signed between NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, and others, which includes language around unknown anomalies. Then there's the strange phenomenon of the overview effect, a shift in consciousness reported by many astronauts who see Earth from orbit. They describe an overwhelming feeling of unity, insignificance, and connection, as if they've seen the bigger picture, and it broke something open. Or a triggered awakening. Is this just psychological? Some believe alien beings are not just watching astronauts, they're reaching out to them in space, that certain orbits, altitudes, or lunar positions act as consciousness amplifiers, opening the mind to communication that bypasses language entirely. Telepathy, emotion, vision. A few even claim that alien contact protocols are hidden inside mission rituals. A gesture during suit-up. A phrase said in isolation. A moment of stillness between transmissions. These aren't set just traditions. They Citra codes. And then, of course, there sits the silence. The many astronauts who sit never spoken, who said seen and chosen not to say. Their eyes say it when they pause during interviews, when the memory is still too sharp, when the question gets too close. You don't need a written confession. Sometimes silence is the message. In this theory, the Astronaut Code is a global agreement, not just between governments but between explorers themselves. An oath that whatever they saw, whatever followed them in orbit, whatever moved outside the window on the dark side of the moon, stays between them. Because if the public knew, we might never look at the stars the same way again. Not all aliens hide in the sky. Some, the theory claims, walk among us. This is the disguise theory. The belief that alien entities have been living on Earth for decades, perhaps even longer, camouflaged by technology, genetic manipulation, or consciousness projection, to appear fully human, or nearly so. They could be your co-worker, your neighbor, even yourself, before you woke up. It begins with the idea that true alien contact wouldn't be limited to spaceships or messages from afar. Instead, the most strategic infiltration and observation would be to blend in. Not in grey skin and black eyes, not with glowing suits or impossible limbs, but in khakis and a button-down, or a lab coat, or a business suit on Capitol Hill. What if the strangest alien technology wasn't shipped a ship, but a face? There are numerous reports from intelligence whistleblowers, especially those tied to Dulce Base, Area 51, or deep psychological ops, that speak of synthetic humanoids. These aren't clones or androids in the classic sense. They are bioengineered beings, built to mimic us in every observable way: bone structure, skin temperature, blinking patterns, even minor human flaws like uneven hairlines or nervous tics. But what gives them away according to reports? Two things: eyes and timing. The eyes are described as too still or too deep, like staring into a well where something else is watching back. Not evil, just not human. And the timing? Microseconds of hesitation in conversation. Perfectly formed sentences, but no emotional lag. They reply as if emotion were calculated, not felt. Some witnesses say these beings don't accept an age. Others swear they've seen the same face decades apart, unaltered. One woman in Switzerland believed her landlord was one of them. He never slept, never ate, but paid rent on time for 14 years. When he vanished, the room he left behind was completely empty. No dust, no scent, no heat signature in thermal scans. Gone like a hologram deactivated. But not all disguise is physical. Some believe the alien presence manifests through consciousness possession, a kind of psychic overlay where the body is human, but the driver isn't. People describe losing time, speaking in unknown languages, or becoming other in their own reflection. This aligns with accounts of walk-ins, where an extraterrestrial intelligence enters a willing or weakened human host, either temporarily or for life. The individual may look the same, but their essence has shifted. Their steps also evidence in folklore. Ancient myths of shapeshifters, skinwalkers, doppelgangers, all possibly cultural memories of alien infiltrators. And modern tales of men in black, described not just as government agents, but as wrong humans, moving stiffly, speaking in strange rhythms, with no understanding of basic human customs like coughing or blinking. Could they be wearing the mask of humanity? The theory goes further. Some believe that alien species have hybridized with humans over generations, creating lineages that appear normal, but carry enhanced perception, psychic sensitivity, or biological immunity to diseases. These individuals often report never feeling truly part of humanity, as if something inside them was always watching, waiting, remembering. Could certain families, bloodlines, or public figures be carriers of this genetic disguise? The evidence is thin, but the patterns, unsettling. A few researchers have identified anomalous biometric traits. Individuals who never scar, those whose voice patterns don't match their DNA signatures, or people who've never been caught on infrared cameras. Then there's the strange reality that most reports of alien encounters, especially abductions, involve beings studying us, not attacking, almost like they're comparing notes. Is it because they used to be us? Or because they set becoming us? The disguise theory is not just about hiding. It's about living among, with the goal of influence, observation, maybe even protection, or replacement. Which leads to the most chilling question of all. What if some of these beings don't know they're disguised? What if part of the disguise is self-forgetting? Until one day, something triggers a memory, a dream, a voice, a vision, and they remember what they truly are. Would you notice it in them? Would they notice it in you? Or are we all, in ways we don't yet understand, wearing disguises far older than our birth? We often ask what aliens know, their science, their ships, their secrets. But this theory asks something more unsettling. What do they believe? Welcome to Aliens That Prayed. The idea that extraterrestrial beings may not only possess spiritual or religious instincts, but may have once worshipped, prayed, or even feared something greater than themselves. It begins with one simple observation. Across human history, belief in higher powers has persisted in every culture, often independent of direct contact. Cave art, ritual burial, celestial myths, all point to a shared instinct to look upward, to something unseen. What if that instinct is instead only human? Several abductees and contactees have reported strange behavior among their captors, beings who paused before an action, who looked upward before initiating a procedure, who hummed, chanted, or moved in synchronized patterns, not mechanically, but ritually. What were they doing? Some say they were praying. These beings didn't just act with intelligence, they acted with deference, as if bound by a higher law, a protocol not of their own making, and occasionally they expressed what could only be described as reverence, not to us, but to something unseen in the room. Theologians intrigued by this theory argue that advanced intelligence doesn't necessarily erase belief. In fact, true evolution might bring not detachment, but humility, the realization that the universe is layered, infinite, unknowable. Why wouldn't an alien civilization, with its own origins and mysteries, develop a cosmology? A mythos? A sacred story? Consider this. If these beings once traveled stars for answers and found silence, wouldn't they invent gods too? There's also a strange pattern in ancient religious texts. Take the book of Ezekiel, where the prophet describes a wheel within a wheel, glowing beings of fire, and a voice descending from a firmament. Many have interpreted this as a possible early alien encounter, retrofitted into religious language. But what if it sips the opposite? What if those beings weren't set pretending to be gods, but were praying to one? Abductees sometimes report being shown visions, not of alien worlds, but of symbolic ones, temples of light, thrones of energy, pyramids hovering above oceans, beings kneeling before a glowing orb. These aren't technological, they're spiritual architectures. One woman described a being touching her forehead and whispering in a voice she didn't understand. She felt not terror, but grace. They weren't set superior, she said. They were pilgrims. Pilgrims. Others speak of aliens conveying moral concern, not about human behavior, but about cosmic balance, as if they were following a higher order, an ethical framework inscribed not in law, but in faith. Could these visitors be missionaries? Or survivors of a once religious species trying to preserve their last sacred rites? There are even suggestions in crop circle geometries, symbols resembling mandalas, sacred geometry, or Kabbalistic diagrams, forms long tied to mystical traditions, not messages per se, but prayers in shape. This theory intersects with the idea of interdimensional beings, entities that travel not just across space but across realms of consciousness. If they've crossed dimensions, they may have encountered what humans only glimpse in near-death experiences or deep meditations. Light, oneness, eternal memory. And perhaps, like us, they reached for it. Maybe what we call angels, spirits, or gods are the same beings they seek, but seen through a different lens. Herecepts, where it turns strange. Some abductees claim they were asked questions by the beings, not about technology or genetics, but about love, about death, about why humans believe. Almost like they were curious, not as scientists, but as fellow seekers. One abductee described her captors placing a hand over her heart and saying, not in words but through emotion, "You carry something we lost." What did they lose? A soul? A creator? A reason? The theory of aliens that prayed isn't comforting, because it means even the most advanced minds in the cosmos might still feel small, still yearn for meaning, still question what came before them. And if they do, then the real contact isn't set technological. It's spiritual, not with our governments, but with our myths, our symbols, our questions, the ones we still whisper in the dark. There are vaults you sit'll never enter, libraries with no catalogue, and doors within doors that open only to silence. This is the theory of the object in the Vatican, a chilling suggestion that the Catholic Church possesses a physical artifact of alien origin, hidden deep within its secret archives. And it sips not just a rumor, it sips a convergence, Across decades, researchers, ex-priests, and even insiders have whispered of a sealed reliquary housed somewhere beneath Vatican City that contains an object not of this earth. A cube. A sphere. A relic wrapped in radiation. The details change depending on who tells it. But the theme remains. Contact was made, and the evidence was quietly claimed, not by a government, but by the Church. Let's step back. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly called the Secret Archive, is known to hold ancient scrolls, royal correspondences, forbidden gospels, even trial documents for figures like Galileo and the Knights Templar. It sips not fiction, it exists. And access is extremely restricted. Only the Pope, select archivists, and a few trusted scholars may request specific materials. Entire chambers remain sealed by papal decree, and what's inside, we can only guess. But theories suggest that during World War II, a crashed object, rumored to have landed in northern Italy, was recovered, not by Mussolini's fascists, but by agents of the Vatican. The object was reportedly small, briefcase-sized, pulsing with heat, etched with unknown script. It was quietly transported to Rome, and sealed beneath layers of holy protection. And what of the witnesses? All silenced. Some say it wasn't Septon the first time. Historical anomalies, including the Caravaca cross, miraculous star machines described by medieval monks, and ancient tales of fiery chariots descending near monasteries, are reinterpreted through this theory as early UFO encounters, mistaken as divine signs, or understood all too well. Because here sits the unsettling idea. The Church didn't mistake these for miracles. They recognized them as not human, and chose to control the narrative. That sips what the theory hinges on. The Vatican, with its 2,000 years of continuity, global influence, and unmatched archival preservation, may be the perfect place to hide alien contact. Unlike governments, it's not democratically accountable. Unlike corporations, it doesn't need profit. It has time, faith, and secrecy on its side. And above all, a motive. For if alien life were proven beyond doubt, many fear it would undermine the theological foundations of religion, creation myths, divine purpose, humanity's special role. Unless, of course, you frame it first. And so, the theory suggests, the artifact is studied in secret, interpreted not as alien, but as angelic, its existence known only to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Jesuit order, and perhaps the Pope himself. In this view, the Church doesn't deny extraterrestrial life. Its already rewritten it. Think of the countless saints' visions involving beings of light descending from above, glowing discs in the sky, or sudden knowledge imparted telepathically. Are these miracles? Or rebranded encounters? Then there's Father Corrado Balducci, a high-ranking Vatican theologian, who spoke openly in the 1990s about aliens being real and not demonic. His statements were peculiar, cautious but clear, and many believe he was given unofficial permission to prepare the public for something larger. Some researchers tie the theory to the Lucifer telescope, an actual infrared observatory in Arizona, part funded by the Vatican. Why would the Church fund a powerful telescope? Some say it's not for astronomy, but for monitoring a return. Perhaps the object was never just an object. Perhaps it was a beacon, or a gift, or worse, a key. And when the stars align, it will activate. There are drawings said to exist, kept in a red-sealed folder marked Providentia Caelestis, showing the object opening, shifting, revealing something not mechanical, but biological. A fragment of something still alive, or once alive, or no longer bound by those terms. And yet, if you ask the Vatican, they still deny it all. Just another rumor. Just another story. Just another secret that never happened. But the Church has never been afraid of the dark. They've always known that faith survives mystery. And so perhaps the object remains, buried in stone, sealed in gold, watched by candlelight, not to be hidden forever. But until the world is ready, there was a transmission. Just one. It came without warning. And it was never repeated. This is the final broadcast. The theory that a single, undeniable message from an alien intelligence was received, recorded, and erased from public knowledge before it could spread. The truth, they say, went silent on purpose. Let's begin with the real event that inspires this theory. The WOW signal. On August 15, 1977, A radio telescope at Ohio State University, part of the SETI program, recorded a 72-second-long burst of radio waves from deep space. The signal was so distinct, so unlikely to be random, that astronomer Jerry Amon circled it on the printout and scribbled "WOW" in red pen, and ever since, it's been known as the WOW signal. But here sips the mystery. It was never heard again. Scientists searched the same coordinates, listened for years, ran simulations, but the signal never returned. Some say it was interference. Others say it was the first and last message humanity ever received from intelligent extraterrestrial life. But this theory goes further. It claims that another signal followed, clearer, longer, and unmistakably artificial. Not a burst. Not static. But a structured message, language embedded in pulses, a greeting or a warning. And it was heard, but not by scientists, by a military satellite. The theory holds that sometime in the late 1980s, during a classified surveillance operation in low orbit, a US defense satellite intercepted a broad-spectrum transmission originating from outside our solar system. The contents, unknown. But reportedly, the signal was decoded into a series of mathematical progressions, followed by pictographic imagery, and finally, a human voice reading a message in multiple Earth languages. Not a computer voice. Not alien gibberish. A human voice. Some believe the message was back-engineered to use Earth languages. Others say it was our own voice, sent back to us, distorted, delayed, and framed in cosmic irony. You are not alone. You were never alone. You do not belong to yourselves. Theories diverge wildly after this point. Some say the message was benevolent, a check-in from a civilization that seeded life on Earth, and was waiting for our consciousness to evolve before making contact. Others say it was a psychological test, a probe to measure our emotional response, panic threshold, or belief systems. But some go darker. They claim the message ended with coordinates, not for a place in space, but for a time, a date that passed years ago, without incident, or without public knowledge of one. So why would the signal be suppressed? Because it wasn't just a message. It was a collapse trigger. Governments, especially those in power during the Cold War, feared what disclosure would do to public order. Economies, religions, scientific institutions, all potentially shattered by one undeniable proof. And so, the signal was labeled existentially destabilizing and buried. Only a few officials were given access to the tape. It was stored in an analog vault, encoded on magnetic media. And then, it was erased, or so they say. But fragments remain. In 1992, a hacker known only as Silence Filter posted a cryptic file dump on a now-defunct message board. Among the files was an audio clip, garbled, layered, impossible to verify, but containing, buried in distortion, a single phrase, "We see your minds, we saw them before." It was taken down within hours. Users who shared it reported strange interference with their devices. Emails vanished. Hard drives failed. And one claimed they received an untraceable phone call, with nothing but breathing on the line. Some say this clip was part of the final broadcast. Others believe the true broadcast still plays, but not on frequencies we can hear. Maybe it loops in the background radiation. Maybe it echoes in dreams. Maybe it waits for the right receiver, a person, not a machine. The question haunts those who believe, why only once? Did they stop watching? Or did they start acting? The most unnerving version of the theory is this. The message wasn't a greeting. It was a termination notice. A final chance. A countdown. A farewell. And now, everything else is just silence. You look in the mirror. You blink. So does it. It looks back. But what if what you see is in fact just you? This is the theory of eyes in the mirror, the unsettling idea that certain reflections are not passive, that sometimes, for a fraction of a second, what looks back is something else entirely. It begins with a question you is probably never asked. Why do mirrors work? They reflect photons. Simple physics. Light bounces, images form. But some theorists suggest that mirrors, especially when placed at specific angles or made of certain materials, act as gateways, not portals in the sci-fi sense, but thin membranes between dimensions. And some of those dimensions sit empty. In folklore, mirrors have always been suspect. In Eastern Europe, they were covered during wakes, not for superstition, but because people believed something could come through. In Mesoamerican lore, obsidian mirrors were used in rituals to see other worlds, a form of scrying that connected the viewer with beings far beyond mortal reach. In ancient Chinese mythology, mirrors reflected not just light, but spirit. They were believed to reveal demons disguised as humans. But this theory modernizes the idea. They look through symmetry. It suggests that alien entities or interdimensional beings observe us through reflections, because mirrors offer them the most stable fixed point in our visual reality. They don't look at us through air or eyes. But what if humans aren't just seeing themselves? You may have heard of the mirror self-recognition test, used to determine consciousness in animals. Only a few species can recognize themselves in a mirror. People across cultures have reported bizarre encounters, looking in the mirror and seeing their reflection lag for a split second, noticing subtle facial differences that revert when looked at again. A sense of being watched, not reflected. Dreams in which mirrors acted as conscious characters, or glitches. Are these hallucinations? Or something watching through the glass? This theory suggests the watchers are ancient, hyper-intelligent, and non-physical, capable of embedding their perception within mirrored surfaces, especially in liminal spaces, bathrooms at night, hallways with mirrors at both ends, elevators. Their interest? Human identity, our fragile sense of self, because mirrors expose something fundamental, that we believe we are what we see. What if they want to understand how we build our image of reality, of individuality, of continuity? But what if that belief is being studied? And what better place than the mirror, where self-perception is concentrated and vulnerable? Some psychologists propose a theory called mirror stage trauma, the idea that seeing oneself for the first time creates a psychic rupture. This theory suggests they noticed that rupture and used it. There are rumors of experiments. One involved a sealed chamber with two-way mirrors, where test subjects reported feeling intense dread, despite no stimuli. One subject claimed the reflection began smiling independently. Another claimed they saw extra eyes, not on their face, but within the glass, blinking slowly in a pattern that didn't match their own. And then there are the disappearances. Cases, undocumented of course, where someone vanished while alone in a mirrored room. No sign of struggle. Just an empty room. And a reflection, still standing. The theory holds that mirrors may act as perceptual synchronizers, aligning the human mind with external observers. And in those moments, contact occurs. When conditions are right, fatigue, stress, liminal timing like 3 a.m., the viewer becomes more permeable. Some say it sends telepathic. Others say it subparasitic. You feel a presence enter your thoughts, not from behind, but from directly in front of you. You feel the sense that your face isn't set your own. You feel watched, not through your eyes, but through theirs. And if you look long enough, you begin to see them. Shadows in your pupils. Tiny flickers in your peripheral vision. Eyes that aren't set quite your color. They mimic you. They mimic well. But they always miss something. And if you catch the glitch, they know. Some who believe in this theory avoid mirrors altogether. They brush their teeth without looking. Cover bathroom mirrors at night. Remove reflective surfaces from their homes. But others stare longer. Invite the gaze. Speak into the mirror. They whisper, "I see you too." The mirror answers back. And sometimes, rarely, a pilot speaks. A voice crackles over the radio. And then static. This is the theory of erased flight recordings. The chilling belief that commercial and military pilots routinely encounter UFOs or unknown phenomena, but those interactions are scrubbed from official records before the public ever hears about them. Not just once, not rarely, but constantly. Let's start with something verifiable. There are hundreds of credible pilot reports describing strange objects, glowing orbs, impossibly fast lights, flying discs performing maneuvers that defy physics. The skies, they say, are full of things we're not meant to know. They're from trained professionals, often former military, with decades of flying experience. Many include radar confirmation, multiple witnesses, visual contact, evasive movement. These reports aren't from conspiracy theorists. And yet, The official transcripts? They vanish. The cockpit recordings? Lost in transfer. The black box data? Corrupted. Why? The theory suggests there sets an international protocol in place, a quiet agreement between air traffic control, defense agencies and airline companies, to intercept, review, and delete any airborne encounter data deemed destabilizing. The justification: avoid panic, maintain control. A global erasure of truth from the skies. But the result? There are stories. In 1986, a Japanese airlines cargo flight over Alaska encountered a massive glowing craft that followed them for over 30 minutes. The pilot, Kenju Tarachi, filed an official report. FAA investigators confirmed the radar returns. But after the story gained traction, Tarachi was grounded. The tapes were pulled, classified. And the investigation? That footage leaked. But insiders claim that other encounters, far more detailed, were removed before they could surface. Then there's the 2004 Nimitz encounter. Multiple Navy pilots tracked a tic-tac-shaped craft off the coast of California. One pilot reportedly recorded an object that split in two, then reassembled in mid-air. The audio log was erased. The radar record, gone. So how is this possible? The theory posits a flowchart. Enter the Flight Data Suppression Unit, an alleged internal team perhaps within NORAD or under NATO, whose sole task is to intercept and redact anomalous aviation data in real time. A UFO encounter is reported by a pilot. The communication is flagged by automated filters. A response team taps into the cockpit recording system. The data is seized, logged, and either wiped or archived in a classified vault. Some believe the erased content is sent to reverse engineering teams. Others say it's analyzed not by humans, but by AI trained on alien encounter patterns. And then there sits the pilots themselves. Some never speak at all. Many speak only after retirement. One commercial pilot, anonymized as Captain Virth, described an incident in 2009 over the Atlantic. There was something pacing us at 37,000 feet. No flight ID, no reflection, no contrail. It stayed beside us for nearly 20 minutes. Then, shot upward, at an angle I can set to explain. He filed a report. He was told the cockpit voice recorder malfunctioned. But he remembered saying one phrase. "What the hell is that thing?" Another pilot described an encounter near the Arctic Circle. He reported it in real time. It never showed up on the transcript. Hours later, his airline was contacted by an unlisted branch of aerospace defense. His flight logs were seized. He was told, "For safety, this didn't happen. It SEPs not just suppression, it SEPs prevention." Modern planes are now equipped with more advanced logging tech, including real-time data relay. But the theory suggests that airlines lease this tech, and the contracts include clauses that allow external partners to intervene and erase in-flight anomalies. Essentially, the sky has moderators. What SIP's most unsettling is the human cost. They suffer nightmares, anxiety, even PTSD. Pilots live with secrets. Not from fear, but from silence. From being gaslit by protocol. One pilot wrote in his will, "There was something up there, and it knew we couldn't talk about it." Erased flight recordings isn't just about UFOs. It's about control. About how the truth can float just beyond the clouds seen by human eyes, described in human words, and still be vanished, as if it were never real. The theory leaves you with one final thought. If we can trust what SIP's recorded in the sky, what else has been erased, mated? This is the theory of the stolen probe. The claim that one or more deep space exploration probes, launched by Earth's space agencies, were not lost to malfunction or distance, but intercepted. And then, it disappeared. By something, or someone, out there. Let's begin with what we know. Not by us. NASA's probes, Pioneer, Voyager, New Horizons, were designed to explore the outer planets and beyond. Some carried golden records with information about Earth, including music, images, and instructions for finding us. A hopeful gesture. A cosmic postcard. But also, perhaps an invitation. The theory suggests someone responded. In 1993, contact was lost with Pioneer 10, one of the first spacecraft to leave the solar system. Officially, its power source decayed. That's expected. But before its signal vanished, several anomalous transmissions were logged, data that didn't match any system output, with timing offsets that made no sense. Some described it as a chirp, others as a modulated hum. It wasn't it from Earth. Then, there sits Voyager 2. But it came through Pioneer. NASA stated it was a faulty memory flip. In 2010, for 17 days, it began transmitting corrupted data. All of its instruments suddenly began outputting gibberish, despite being fully operational. But an independent researcher in Germany claimed the bit flip changed the probe's communication protocol, as if someone had reprogrammed it. And when it resumed normal function, it acted like nothing happened. No full explanation has ever been given. Now enter the theory, not destroyed, that one of these probes, likely Pioneer 11 or Voyager 1, was intercepted beyond the heliopause. Not malfunctioned. Taken. How? Theorists claim there are objects, unidentified, hovering just beyond our solar system. These objects don't reflect normal light. They aren't asteroids or dwarf planets. Their trajectories are too stable, too aligned with outgoing human craft. They don't sit-move until we send something. Then they do. This theory became louder after the Oumuamua incident in 2017, an object from outside the solar system that sped past the sun. It didn't behave like a comet. It accelerated as it left. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb suggested it could be an alien probe, but others flipped the theory. What if Oumuamua wasn't set theirs, but ours, returning? Or worse, returning altered. Some believe that when our probes reach a certain threshold, in distance or velocity, they enter a surveillance grid, a border, a checkpoint. And at that checkpoint, something waits. Not to attack, but to evaluate. After all, if we sent a device into deep space and discovered another civilization's artifact drifting by, what would we do? We set scan it. We set take it. We set hide it. This raises even more disturbing possibilities. So why wouldn't sit they? What if the probe wasn't just taken, but followed? Some suspect the probe's broadcast signal could have been reversed, used to map its origin. The golden records aboard Voyager include instructions to find Earth. Not theoretical, literal. Coordinates. Physics. Our address. The theory suggests that intercepting Voyager was like finding a treasure map to an unguarded vault. Not aggressive, just opportunistic. Some even claim the probe was returned in disguised form, that unknown satellites or space junk spotted in low orbit might be Voyager 1 or 2, rebuilt, redirected, altered. NASA has never confirmed such returns. But not all objects in orbit are catalogued, and some launch windows don't match any known mission. In 2022, amateur astronomers picked up an object transmitting in Morse code-like pulses, circling Earth in an eccentric path. It didn't match any registered satellite, and the signal. It contained fragments of the Voyager record's waveform. Coincidence? Or contact? It saps about curiosity, alien or human. This theory isn't set about war or warning. We sent out a probe. We embedded songs, math, images of our DNA, our faces, our planet. And then we launched it into the dark. We told the universe where to find us. The only real mystery is, did someone answer? And if they did, what did they take with them? Because maybe we didn't lose a probe. Maybe we just gave it away. And we still waiting to see what comes back. It stips the oldest twist in the book. The mirror turns. The monster takes off its mask. And it sits your face. This is the theory known as they were us. A disturbing suggestion that the beings we call aliens aren't aliens at all. They stir human. Or more precisely, they sit what we become. Let's begin with a strange consistency. Across countless abduction reports, visions and alleged sightings, a pattern emerges. The beings, whether labeled Greys, Nordics or something else, often resemble us in uncanny ways. Bipedal, 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, tool-using, intellect-driven, emotionless, yet intelligent. But why should that be? If evolution is random across the universe, then extraterrestrial life should look wildly alien, not humanoid. The odds of convergent evolution producing something that walks, gestures and stares like us are astronomically small. In other words, familiar. Unless they sit from our future. unless they stare to not from another planet. This theory suggests that what we been encountering, in dreams, in deserts, in split seconds of bright light, is not visitors from space, but visitors from time. Some call them chrononauts. Others, post-humans. The idea that humanity doesn't die out. We evolve. We adapt. We diverge, gradually or catastrophically, into something that looks different, thinks differently, lives differently. Perhaps due to environmental collapse, or technological integration, or deep space colonization that reshapes biology. Imagine a future where humans no longer breathe Earth's air, no longer speak, no longer reproduce biologically, but survive in fragile, cloned forms. Thin limbs, small mouths unused to speech, large eyes adapted to low light. Does that sound familiar? Some even suggest that's why they come back, not to study us as a curiosity, but to study themselves, to understand what was lost, to reclaim genetic material. Abduction stories often include themes of medical exams, reproductive focus, emotional testing, a desperate attempt to reinsert humanity into a post-human lineage. Terrifying to the subject, but perhaps to them, it's research. What we see as alien might be a distorted echo of ourselves. What we fear might be our own reflection. And the timeline gets stranger. There are accounts, especially among indigenous groups, of beings who resemble us, but don't act like us. Silent travelers, emotionless observers, always watching, never interfering. In some traditions they're known as the Watchers. In others, the Sky Ancestors. Some ancient texts even describe pale, hairless people emerging during cosmic cycles to witness, and sometimes correct, human behavior. The theory asks, what if they said not coming to us from elsewhere, but from the return path of a future already lived? This would explain another anomaly. Their technology doesn't seem physical. Craft appear and disappear. Time stretches. Walls melt. Objects pass through solid matter. Beings move in and out of awareness. We interpret this as magical or advanced. But what if it's just time-based tech? In other words, they don't need to visit us from light years away. Not faster than light travel, but mastery over causality itself. They sit already here. Because we sat already there. But why stay hidden? If they spur us, why not reveal the truth? The theory suggests that direct contact could shatter the timeline. Imagine if you saw your great-great-grandchild, not as a baby, but as something unrecognizable. It might not save the world. Imagine they told you what you become. It might break it. And maybe they know that. So they nudge. They observe. They experiment. They try to remember what they were, what we are, without changing too much. Because if they interfere too hard, they might erase themselves. It's not a perfect theory, but it reframes the entire alien question. We start being studied by ourselves. We stir not being visited. Not because we are interesting, but because we sit critical. Because something in our time, in your time, was lost. And maybe, just maybe, they're trying to get it back. So when you dream of strange eyes watching, when you see a silhouette in the woods, when time feels thin, and you feel observed, ask yourself, is that someone else? Or is that you? You stared up at the sky before, looking for peace, for stars, for meaning. But what if it's been staring back, but aware? This is the theory of the watching sky, the idea that something above us is not simply vast or beautiful, not space itself, not just satellites or craft, a layer of surveillance so advanced, so subtle, that we forgot to ask. But the sky as a system. What if we are never not being seen? Let's begin not with aliens. In the natural world, awareness is everything. But with animals, predators evolve forward-facing eyes. Prey develop panoramic vision. Camouflage is used to avoid detection. But even camouflage fails if your observer sees in frequencies you don't. Now imagine you sit prey, living on a planet. And above you is a field of awareness, watching not through eyes but through frequencies, gravitational shifts, neural ripples, even memory itself. The watching sky isn't set to fleet. It isn't set to God. It's a system of consciousness. Planetary scale. Some say it's artificial, built by an ancient race. Others say it's natural, an emergent intelligence born from dark matter or electromagnetic webs. But either way, the claim is simple. The sky is watching. Always. It's not just telescopes that look up. UFOs, many believe, aren't piloted craft. They're sensory nodes, probes of consciousness that appear when emotional or psychic spikes occur. What if something looks down? That's why they often appear during moments of crisis. Wars, disasters, mass meditation events, solar flares. It's not about geography. Some researchers go further, claiming that entire weather systems may be manipulated for surveillance purposes. That clouds, auroras, even contrails might be repurposed, not just to obscure visibility, but to enhance it. It's steps about resonance. You think the sky hides them? Maybe it is them. In 1994, a group of stargazers in Arizona reported seeing an enormous translucent disk overhead, not glowing, not flying, simply resting above the atmosphere, barely visible except for how it warped the stars. They said it felt like being watched. Not visually, emotionally, as if their thoughts were no longer private, as if something was listening in, not to what they said, but to how they felt. And this brings us to the next part of the theory, the emotional field. Many ancient traditions believed the sky was a mirror. Not metaphorically, literally. That the heavens reflect our state. That storms, eclipses and comets were expressions, not events. Now imagine a civilization capable of reading our planet's emotional output, scanning human energy the way we scan radio waves. They wouldn't need to land. They wouldn't need to abduct. They just watch. From above. All the time. And the data they gather wouldn't be numbers or files. It would be feeling, despair, hope, conflict, unity. Some spiritual traditions say that humanity is being observed not for control, but for timing. That once we reach a certain harmonic resonance, once enough people awaken or feel the right emotion in unison, the sky will respond. Remember the Phoenix Lights? 1997. And perhaps it already has. Thousands saw a triangular formation of lights slowly glide across the sky. It didn't move like an aircraft. It made no sound. And then, it vanished. Most of the witnesses said the same thing. It felt like it was watching us. Now reverse the question. What if the lights were just the visible iris of something greater? What if every night, above the clouds just out of reach, a system is calibrating us, not as individuals, but as a species? It may not judge. It may not interfere. It may only watch. Next time you stare up at a moonlit sky, ask yourself, but knowing that changes things. Is this just atmosphere and stars? Or is this a ceiling of eyes? Because if the watching sky is real, then maybe the reason we haven't found aliens yet is that we start not looking in the right direction. Maybe we don't need to look out. Maybe we need to look up and inward. Because sometimes the one being watched is the last to realize. They sit in the test. So now we return to silence. Not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of knowing too much to speak. You've walked through 50 doorways, each a theory, a possibility, a whispered alternative to the official story. Some felt plausible. Others, wild. A sense that something is near. But all of them had something in common. That the boundaries we assumed between species, timelines, realities, and dimensions were never boundaries at all. Just veils. And those veils are thinning. The governments redact. The institutions deflect. The skeptics scoff. But the skies stay full. The stories keep coming. And the feeling, that uneasy feeling, deep in your body when the lights flicker, when the static shifts, when the dream speaks back, it never really leaves, does it? On a pale blue dot, spinning through darkness. But what if the darkness is crowded? You were told you were alone. What if we've always had company? We just lacked the vocabulary to describe them. Cave paintings hinted at it. Ancient texts whispered it. The villagers who watched the lights rise above the trees. They knew. The ones who were taken and returned different. They tried to tell us. The astronauts who paused before answering the camera, they knew. Some call them gods. Beings from Zeta Reticuli. Others, ancestors. Machines from parallel Earths. Sentinels from deep time. projections from our collective unconscious. Does it matter what name we give them? And maybe it's not them who are forbidden. What matters is that something other has been near us, maybe since the beginning. But us. Maybe we were quarantined, cut off, until we were ready. Or maybe we've always been ready, and the only thing keeping us apart is fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing control. Fear of seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes. Because contact isn't set just a meeting. It tips a mirror, and the mirror is cracking. Think about it. Why do so many of these stories end with silence? Not with destruction, or takeover, or conquest, but with a single message, delivered in dreams, visions, transmissions, and hypnotic recollections. You are not alone. Not, we are coming. Not, prepare yourselves. Just, you were never alone. It accepts not comfort. It accepts a confrontation. Because to accept that truth is to give up the illusion of isolation. To stop pretending that the earth is all there is. To admit that we are part of a much bigger story. One that sits still unfolding. You don't need to believe every theory. You don't need to pick a side. You only need to stay open. Because what comes next might not be disclosure. Might not be a ship over the White House. What comes next might be quieter. A signal. A feeling. A shift in the air. A moment where something changes. Not out there, but in you. And when that moment comes, remember this. You were warned. You were prepared. So rest now, and you were never alone. Let your thoughts drift. The sky is still watching, but so are you. And somewhere, out there, or in here, they spur listening.